بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, we have gathered here today for an important lecture on the issue of the Rak'ats of Taraweeh in the holy month of Ramadan. And before we start, I'd like to thank As-Subah Academy for inviting me here today. And before we actually go into this issue of presenting the evidences, we should mention why we are gathered here today. The actual reason why we are gathered here today is because unfortunately in many parts of the world people gather in the masajid in the holy month of Ramadan, and after 8 rakats they abandon the masjid. And abandoning the masjid means that they actually abandon the jama'ah, so they are depriving themselves of actually listening to the Holy Quran from beginning to end. And also, therefore, going against the narration which mentions that your past sins are forgiven if you actually congregate and pray behind the Imam from the beginning to the end. So they are depriving themselves and also disturbing those who are staying back to complete the next 12 rakats as well. Now, with all due respect to them, they would say that we are doing this because we firmly believe it is the Sunnah of the Prophet Sallallahu and the Sahaba that they performed a maximum of 8 rakats. So this is their da'wah, that's their call or their claim. And so therefore we need to present their evidences and address their evidences. And in order to do that, we must also give the counter evidences which are providing significant evidence for 20 rakats of Taraweeh. And in doing so, we have to be balanced. We have to present our evidences for 20, their evidences for 8, and address them in a polite and academic manner. Now, people leave the masjid after 8 rakats. They don't go straight home. A lot of them you'll see also they're lingering outside the masjid and causing some form of disturbance as well, especially the youth. And more than that, we get another party amongst this crowd, unfortunately, using the views of certain people that they look up to, adhere to, and promote this view that praying more than 8 rakats is an innovation, a bid'ah. So this is a very dangerous statement to believe in or make, and has been made by certain individuals that we can name later on, inshallah. So if these people are proposing this type of view and promoting and promulgating this type of view, and therefore declaring people to be innovators, then they need to be addressed in an academic way as well. So we don't call people who perform 8 rakats as innovators. What we can say is that you have not fulfilled the Sunnah. You've not fulfilled the Sunnah because technically this prayer, the Salatul Taraweeh as it's called, it's not fard and it's not wajib, it's a Sunnah prayer. So whoever performs it gets rewarded for it. So if you're going to pray 8 and you leave the masjid, we're not calling you innovators. But why do you, certain people who perform 8 rakats, call those who exceed 8 rakats innovators? Where do you get this from? Can you quote any of the Imams of the Sallallahu, alaihi, that you claim to adhere to and respect ever say such a thing, that anyone who performs more than 8 rakats is an innovator? I doubt if they could. But why is it that certain youth in the West promote this person's view, which the person I'm talking about I have not named yet, I'll mention later on, without investigating if he had hit the mark or not? So this is a form of taqleed that they're doing, or blind following as they like to call it. And if you ask these people, what is your evidence for 8 rakats, they usually give a couple of evidences, which we'll talk about later as well. So before we get to their evidences, we should really provide our evidences and a bit of history behind our evidences. So what we do know from authentic narrations is that the Prophet ﷺ himself only congregated in Masjid al-Nabawi in Medina for around 3 nights. For only 3 nights. And he led a certain number of rakats. And we have evidence for that, which we will get to. So, 3 nights, and after that, he advised the Sahaba to go and pray individually. So he didn't want to burden them in any way that they need to congregate and come every night till the end of Ramadan. And so they went and prayed individually in their homes or in their masjids, but not in Jama'ah. So this continued in the time of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, and then it continued in the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab. Because Umar radiallahu anhu's Khalifa was much longer than Abu Bakr as-Siddiq's Khalifa. So sometimes what he would notice in his Khalifa was that the people would congregate in Masjid al-Nabawi behind one Imam, and another group would do the same with another Imam, and others were praying individually. So what did he do? This is in Sahih Bukhari. He decided to get everyone together and get them to pray behind two Imams. One being Ubay bin Qab, and the other was Tamim ad-Dari, two of the noble companions of the Prophet Sallallahu. And they performed a set number of rakats as well. What did they pray? Would be something that they would have inherited from the Prophet Sallallahu. They were not innovators, the Sahaba, that they would just create a certain number of rakats. They were imitators. What they performed in terms of number of rakats, they had inherited from those 3 nights that the Prophet ﷺ publicly performed. The number of rakats they inherited and publicly performed in the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab. So this then continued to be the practice in the Khalifa of Umar ibn al-Khattab, set number of rakats that we're going to get to later on. Then this was inherited by the next Khalif, the third Khalif, Uthman ibn Affan, and they performed the same number of rakats. Then it was transmitted into the generation of the next Khalif, Ali ibn Abi Talib, and it again was the set number of rakats, which we're going to get to as well. And this practice continued to be the hallmark of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. So those who are Sunni Muslims, they adhered to this practice, all 4 madhabs, that they would perform a set number of rakats in Ramadan. Now the early ulama, they did have a difference of opinion. What's better? Is it better to pray in the masjid behind a imam or two for a set number of rakats, or should we pray individually at home? So there is some difference of opinion. But later on the ulama said it is better that the masjids always have a congregation. If people want to pray at home on an individual basis, then we can't condemn them. But it's better to pray in the masjid. Why? Because traditionally, we would select the huffaz of our locality or outside our locality and bring them in and get them to complete the whole Quran from beginning to end. A set number of imams would be brought in, or huffaz would be brought in to complete the Quran. So therefore, a greater reward in going to the masjid and being attentive and standing from the beginning to the end for every night if possible to get the maximum reward in the blessed month of Ramadan, where rewards are also multiplied if your intention is sahih, correct as well. So let us go into this issue of the rakats of Taraweeh and the Sunnah of the Salaf. What was the practice of the Salafus Salihin? Sunnah meaning here now practice of the Salafus Salihin. And I'm talking about the first 3 generations of Islam. The Sahaba, the Tabi'een, the followers of the Sahaba, and the Tabat Tabi'een, the followers of the Sahaba. And then after that as well, those who inherited the mantle of the Salafus Salihin, min Khalafus Sadiqeen. Because Islam continued to be spread after the Sahaba, obviously, and the Tabi'een and Tabat Tabi'een, until it reached our time. So these precise rakats, number of rakats, were inherited by the people who came after the Salaf. So we will have to quote some of them as well. And now, we should mention that we use 2 sources of the Sharia to determine the number of rakats. Primarily, the Sunnah of the Prophet Sallallahu. Then, the practice of the Sahaba and what they agreed upon, which is called Al-Ijma, the agreement of the Sahaba. So we've got two sources of the Sharia. The first source being the Quran. The Quran does not speak about the rakats of Taraweeh. The Sunnah, we have a set number of narrations from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ mentioning the rakats that the Prophet ﷺ performed in Ramadan. And then we have a set number of narrations that the Sahaba, how many rakats did they perform? And some narrations from the Tabi'een as well, and Tabat Tabi'een as well, that are found in certain collections of hadith. And then we have later scholars mentioning an agreement of the Sahaba on a set number of rakats. And that set number being 20. So this is the first time I'm mentioning 20. So therefore, it is natural that we mention the evidences for 20 rakats first. Because this is the dominant position of the Salafus Salihin. The majority of the Salafus Salihin performed this number of rakats, 20 rakats. And how do we come to that conclusion? We look at the sources of early Islam. and the reliable books after the Salafus Salihin, who have determined and mentioned what was the strongest view and the evidences, as well as where the scholars have mentioned ijma as well. So some of these points we need to mention. And what I'm going to summarize here today is actually based on more than 500 pages of research that I have published online, more than 500 pages in 3 works. What we've got here today is around 30 pages, and it's the cream of the crop, the best of the 500 plus pages gathered together in about 30 pages. And so therefore we know a lot of people don't have time to read, and even if they can read, they don't understand what they're reading as well. So I will try my best to summarize more than 500 pages in some 30 pages today. And for the benefit of those who couldn't make it here today, inshallah this will be uploaded through social media platforms so that it is there for posterity's sake, meaning after our time inshallah, and it can be shared and circulated through various social media platforms, through the phone, through the internet, and all those mediums that are out there today as well. And I do know some people from outside the UK also requested it to be recorded so that they could benefit as well. Why? Because this issue of the Rak'ats of Taraweeh, the debate surrounding it, has been ongoing for a long period of time. More than 100 years. More than 100 years. So there have been a number of works written, especially in the Urdu language, because in the Indian subcontinent we have this conflict, this issue going for more than 100 years. And also in Arab lands as well. There have been works defending 20 and answering 8. And some people promote 8 and answer the 20 rakat evidences as well. So I've looked at a lot of these works and put them down into the English language. And let us look at the issue of 20 rakats first. So the first narration that I want to bring forward is one that many people are not familiar with, have not heard, because the work was inaccessible to most of the scholars. So there is one narration that many of the scholars know of and have mentioned, going back to a companion of the Prophet ﷺ known as Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. So I'm not going to quote that narration first, because that one is well known, and that one is more or less agreed upon to be weak. Though some say, no, it's not weak, it's actually something else, which we'll talk about later, meaning a good narration. So first narration I'm going to bring is from a companion called Jabir bin Abdullah radiallahu anhu. And this narration is in a book called Tarikh Jurjan. Tarikh Jurjan, meaning the history of Jurjan, a place called Jurjan in Persia, what we call Iran today. And this is a book of history, but not as we know of history, meaning the history of the narrators of Jurjan, the hadith narrators, the scholars of Jurjan. So Tarikh here means the narrators, the history or the biographies of the narrators of hadith or the scholars in general who lived in Jurjan, compiled by an Imam of hadith by the name of Hamza bin Yusuf al-Sahmi. And this Imam, he lived between approximately 340 after the Hijrah. It's not known exactly when he was born, but he died in 427 after the Hijrah. So his work, Tarikh Jurjan, a rare work that most scholars in Islamic history did not have access to. They knew of it, but very few copies were available to access. Only a few scholars had access to it. And in our time, this book, it is only known to exist as one manuscript copy. Just one manuscript copy. And surprisingly, this one manuscript copy is found here in the UK, in England, and it is preserved in Oxford University. Oxford University. Now this manuscript, a copy of it, a photographic copy of it, was sent to India at the request of Da'iratul Ma'arif in Hyderabad, India, a very famous publishing house. They got a copy of it and they edited it and published it in 1950. So we're talking more than 60 years ago, coming 70 years. So it has been published using this one manuscript, and this manuscript is, you can still go and see it. Myself, I've been to Oxford University in August 2016, and I requested to see that manuscript, and they provided the manuscript, and I sat there for 3 straight hours photographing the whole manuscript. So I have got that manuscript, and this manuscript is in what's known as the William Lord collection, L-A-U-D, not L-O-R-D, Lord, William Lord, someone from hundreds of years ago. He had it in his library, William Lord collection number 276 in the Western Library. It's called the Western Library now, but before He used to be in something called the Bodleian Library. So if you get Tarikh Jurjan, the printed edition, you see on the front page, they mention the Bodleian Library, number 276, Oxford University. They even acknowledge that at the beginning. At the front page, I've seen it myself. You can find this book online as well as a PDF copy. So this was published and edited by the late Shaykh Abdul Rahman al-Muallimi, who's a Salafi scholar. And remember this name because he's going to be mentioned later again when we talk about one of the evidences on 20 rakats of Tarawih. What did he have to say about it? Shaykh Abdul Rahman al-Muallimi al-Yamani died 1386, approximately 1966 of the Christian era. He was from Yemen, but he was an editor in Da'iratul Ma'arif, which is a Hanafi organization, published many Hanafi classics and still exists today. So this organization, they employed him and he edited a few hadith related works, one of them being Tarikh Jurjan, another one Kitab al-Jar wa Ta'dil of Ibn Abi Hatim al-Razi, Kitab of Imam al-Bukhari al-Tarikh al-Kabir, and some other works as well. So he did some good work in editing the manuscripts because he's an expert on manuscripts, but himself, his Aqidah was Salafi, and we'll mention what he has to say about one of our evidences later on, inshallah. So what does this work mention, Tarikh Jurjan? There is a narration in there with a chain of transmission, and I'll just mention the English translation. Imam Hamza bin Yusuf al-Sahmi, he gives a chain of transmission through this route. He says, Abul Hasan Ali ibn Muhammad ibn Ahmed al-Qasri, the good Shaykh, min the Salih Shaykh, may Allah have mercy upon him, transmitted to us the Abdul Rahman ibn Abdul Mu'min, the good servant, meaning Salih servant, transmitted to us, who said, Muhammad ibn Humayd al-Razi informed me. So remember this name, Muhammad ibn Humayd al-Razi. That Umar ibn Harun, remember this name as well, his teacher Umar ibn Harun transmitted to us. That Ibrahim ibn al-Hannaz transmitted to us from Abdul Rahman, from Abdul Malik bin Atiq, from Jabir bin Abdullah, who said, now in the chain it says Ibrahim ibn al-Hannaz. This is a mistake. It is actually Ibrahim ibn al-Mukhtar. As the editor of Tarikh Jurjan, Shaykh Abdul Rahman al-Muallimi al-Yamani mentioned in the footnote number 1, under number 556. It's actually Ibrahim ibn al-Mukhtar, and we know that because I'm going to give another chain which mentions it as Ibrahim al-Mukhtar. So Jabir bin Abdullah, he said, the Prophet Sallallahu alaihi wasallam emerged one night in Ramadan. خرج النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ذات ليلة في رمضان وصلى الناس 24 ركعة ووتر بثلاثة. That the Prophet Sallallahu alaihi wasallam emerged one night in Ramadan. So he came out in Masjid al-Nabawi from the adjoining property, which was his house where Aisha radiallahu anha used to be present. That house we're talking about. Because he had other properties as well for the other wives. So we're talking about Aisha's property. He came into the masjid, which is directly aligned. The Prophet ﷺ emerged one night in Ramadan, and the people prayed 24 rakats and 3 rakats of witr. So someone may say, well, I thought you said you pray 20 rakats. What's 24 now? Well, let's think about it. We do perform 24 rakats in Jamaat, don't we? How? 4 rakats Isha, yes? And then later on, a bit later on, 20 rakats with one or several Huffaz, Imams. So that's 24 rakats. The Prophet led all 24 rakats. And then the witr, 3 rakats of witr. So that's what that refers to. Now this narration, we admit there's some weakness in the chain of transmission. The above narration has weakness due to the presence of Umar ibn Harun in the Sanad. Umar ibn Harun. That's why I said pay attention to certain names. Umar ibn Harun. For brevity's sake, there's a lot been said about Umar ibn Harun, but we can mention the Imam ibn Hajar al-Asqalani died 852 after the Hijrah, the great scholar of hadith in his time in Egypt. In his Tahzib al-Tahzib, he's mentioned under the entry for Umar ibn Harun that a number of Imams weakened him. I'll just mention these Imams. I'm not going to mention what they said. I've mentioned that in my longer works. So he mentioned that Ibn Sa'ad, Abdurrahman ibn Mahdi, Abu Dawud, Ali ibn al-Madini, Abu Zur'a, al-Jawzajani, al-Nasai, Salih ibn Muhammad, Abu Ali al-Hafiz, al-Saji, al-Ijli, al-Darqutni, Abu Nu'aym, Ibn Hibban, and Yahya ibn Ma'in, all weakened Umar ibn Harun. So we mentioned Abdurrahman ibn Mahdi, but there is also a counter view from Abdurrahman ibn Mahdi. From Ibn Hibban in his Kitab al-Majruhin min al-Muhaddithin, volume 2, page 63, he mentions that Ibn Mahdi, Abdurrahman ibn Mahdi, and Ibn Mahdi had good opinion for him. So there's two views going back to about Ibn Mahdi's view on Umar ibn Harun. And that does occur sometimes. Some Imams, they'll give one grading at one time, and then they revise their grading because some other extra information came along and give a second opinion. Okay, now there were other scholars who likewise disparaged him. Umar ibn Harun we're talking about. And very few had praised him. So Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, he has a book called Taqrib al-Tahzib. He summarizes all of the views that he's mentioned in his work, Tahzib al-Tahzib. So he gives like a conclusion, his personal conclusion, which many scholars agree with often, but sometimes they dispute his verdict. Because Ibn Hajar may not have made the right judgment, or he may have missed some information as well. And sometimes you find Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, he gives other views on the same narrator as well, in other works as well. So, he says in Taqrib al-Tahzib, that Umar ibn Harun abandoned and he was a hafiz. In his matruk, when Umar ibn Harun is abandoned, matruk, but he was a hafiz. What do we mean by hafiz? Not hafiz of Quran, hafiz of hadith. That he knew many hadiths, he memorized many hadiths, but he wasn't perfect. He wasn't perfect in his retentive skills. He used to err and make mistakes and things like that. That's why there's a lot of criticism against him. And then Ibn Hajar, he has another grading on Umar ibn Harun in Talkhis al-Habir. In that work he says, and it is from the narration of Umar ibn Harun, and he is weak. So weak is actually not as severe as matruk. Matruk is a more severe grading. So Imam Abu Isa al-Tirmidhi, many of us are familiar with him, one of the Imams, the 6 famous collections of hadith, Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Jami al-Tirmidhi, Sunan Abi Dawud, Sunan Nasai, Sunan Ibn Majah, 6 books of hadith, which we know people call as Sihah Sittah. He has something to say about this as well. Abu Isa al-Tirmidhi, he is the student of Imam al-Bukhari. And both of them are buried in Uzbekistan. Both of them are buried in Uzbekistan. And we know some scholars from the UK, Mufti Taqi, Usmani, just this week gone, they went and visited the grave of Imam al-Bukhari and Imam al-Tirmidhi. So they're buried in Uzbekistan. Imam al-Tirmidhi, in his Jami', number 2762, under 2762, he has something to say about Umar ibn Harun. What does he say? Let me mention the translation. He says that Hannad transmitted to us by saying, Umar ibn Harun transmitted to us from Usama bin Zayd, from Amr bin Shuaib, from his father, who related from his grandfather, that the Prophet Sallallahu, alaihi sallam would take, meaning hair by cutting, from his beard, from its breadth, meaning from the sides, and its length. So this narration seems to indicate that someone can trim their beard from the side and the length. But the problem is, the narration itself is not authentic. So he then continues to say, Tirmidhi says, this hadith is gharib, meaning strange. I heard Muhammad bin Ismail, meaning al-Bukhari, his teacher, say Umar ibn Harun is muqarib al-hadith. What does this term muqarib al-hadith mean? We'll come to it soon. I do not know of a hadith of this that has no origin, or he said which is alone, or which he is alone in narrating except this hadith. Meaning Umar ibn Harun, so Bukhari is speaking here, that I do not know of a hadith of his that has no origin, meaning all the other hadiths he transmits, he has other people backing him up, meaning Umar ibn Harun, except this one about trimming the beard. He is alone, and that's why this narration is called gharib, strange as well, because he's not supported by anyone, it's by himself he narrates it, and no one else independently supports him from its breadth and length. So, and we do not know of it except from the hadith of Umar ibn Harun, and I saw that he, meaning al-Bukhari, had a good opinion, Hasan al-Ray for Umar, meaning Umar ibn Harun. So Imam al-Bukhari, as an expert on praise and dispraise of narrators, he had a good opinion for Umar ibn Harun, and he knew by looking at his hadith that Umar ibn Harun, even if he is considered to be weak, technically, what he transmits is usually supported independently through other chains of transmission, asanid, the plural of sanad or isnad, and may be supported by more reliable narrators than himself. And then he continues to say, Tirmidhi, and I heard Qutayba saying Umar ibn Harun was a person of hadith, meaning he was a person of hadith, meaning scholar of hadith in some way. And he would say faith, meaning iman, is saying qawl and action amal. So this is an aqidah point. I heard Qutayba say, Waqi ibn al-Jarrah transmitted to us from a man from Thawr bin Yazid that the Prophet Sallallahu, alaihi, sallam raised a catapult against the people of what? The town known as Ta'if. Ta'if, which is not far from Makkah. Qutayba said, I said to Waqi, who is this person? He said, your companion Umar ibn Harun. So all of this is from Tirmidhi, number 2762. You can find it under the English translation. Now we can come to some sort of conclusion. The three significant points have been mentioned from Imam al-Bukhari from the above statement of his student Tirmidhi. Number one, Umar bin Harun was Muqarib al-Hadith, and I've not defined that yet. Number two, Bukhari had a good opinion about Umar ibn Harun. Number three, the Al-Bukhari knew that Umar ibn Harun's hadith all have an origin, asl, except the one about the trimming of the beard as recorded by Tirmidhi and others. You can find it in other collections as well. So this is not an evidence for trimming the beard, because the narration itself is not authentic. But Bukhari knew other narrations from Umar ibn Harun that he transmitted, which were supported independently by other students or hadith scholars who lived at the time of Umar ibn Harun. So what is the meaning of Muqarib al-Hadith? We can find Al-Hafiz Abdul Haq al-Ishbili died 581 after the Hijrah in his As-Salah wal-Tahajjud. As-Salah wal-Tahajjud, about prayers and Tahajjud. This has been published as well. Page 170 of the edition by Adil Abul Mu'ati. He quotes from Imam al-Bukhari as follows when discussing the narrator known as Abu Zilal. Al-Bukhari said, Abu Zilal is Muqarib al-Hadith. It is desired that his hadith is near to the hadith of the trustworthy narrators al-Thiqat. That is, there's no problem with him. So Imam al-Bukhari, what he meant by Muqarib al-Hadith is that he has no real problems with him. We can accept the generality of his narrations. One can now also come to the conclusion that the vast majority of hadith scholars of the past have considered Umar ibn Harun to be weak in some way. We mentioned all those narrators or scholars of hadith who weakened Umar ibn Harun, while a few have considered him to be a type of acceptable narrator, maqbul narrator. Now the question is, can Umar ibn Harun's narrations be strengthened to what's known as a Hasan hadith, a good hadith or not? So we're going to admit the first narration I brought forward in Tarikh Jurjan of Hamza bin Yusuf al-Sahmi, with the chain of transmission that we narrated, coming through Umar ibn Harun, it's weak, technically, da'if. But we're trying to say now, is it possible to strengthen his narration or not? Through another route, another chain of transmission, not containing him. Is this possible or not? So that's the question that needs to be addressed next. If he is corroborated by at least one narrator who is more reliable than himself or not, that's the question. The answer is that this narration of the 20 Rak'ats hadith going back to Jabir radiallahu anhu can be strengthened, as his own pupil known as Muhammad ibn Humayd al-Razi. That's why I said before, remember these two names. Now we're coming to Muhammad ibn Humayd al-Razi, who is number 3 in the chain found in Tarikh Jurjan, supported him independently. So we have another narration going back to Jabir, another chain, isnad, going back to Jabir, which does not contain Umar ibn Harun. Okay? This is because Muhammad ibn Humayd, who is overall a more reliable narrator than Umar ibn Harun, also narrated the hadith directly from the next narrator in the chain of transmission that we find in Tarikh Jurjan, namely Ibrahim ibn al-Mukhtar. Now this will be observed by looking at the next narration that I'm going to present from a rare work called Al-Mashyakha al-Baghdadiyya by Al-Hafiz Abu Tahir as-Silafi. Now this is such a rare work that very few scholars had access to it, just like Tarikh Jurjan. And I would say Al-Mashyakha al-Baghdadiyya is more rare than the Tarikh Jurjan. Very few people had access to it. Now who is as-Silafi? We'll mention something about him soon. And what is his work about? We'll mention something. But let's just mention something from a later scholar about Umar ibn Harun. What does he have to say? His name is Imam Nuruddin al-Haythami. He's the teacher of Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. Nuruddin al-Haythami, he has a book called Majma' al-Zawaid wa Manba' al-Fawaid. This is a hadith collection where he takes the hadiths which are not from the Sihah Sitta, as we say, but they're from the 3 Mu'jams of Tabarani. Mu'jam al-Kabir, Mu'jam al-Awsat, Mu'jam al-Saghir, and Musnad al-Bazzar, and Musnad Ahmed ibn Hanbal, Musnad Abu Ya'la al-Mawsili, some 6 works that I've mentioned. What he does, he went through all of these 6 books that I've just mentioned, and he brings the narrations from the 6 books that are not found in the Sihah Sittah. This is called Zawaid in hadith terminology. So he extracted the narration from these 6 books that I've mentioned, but only the ones that are not found in Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, Nasai, and Ibn Majah. This is called Zawaid. So Majma' al-Zawaid. Okay, so he missed a few, by the way, and that may be because of the manuscripts he had. So Shaykh Nuruddin al-Haythami died 807 after the Hijrah. He mentions something about Umar ibn Harun after mentioning a narration and a chain. He says, and in the chain is Umar ibn Harun, and he is weak but dependable. Meaning we don't outright reject him. We can sort of strengthen his narration. So, the second narration I'm going to bring, the narration of Jabir bin Abdullah in al-Mashyikhah al-Baghdadiyya of al-Hafiz Abu Tahir as-Silafi. As-Silafi was born in 475 after the Hijrah. And he is also from Persian speaking area, what we call Iran today. He was from Iran originally, and he died in 576 after the Hijrah. So he's a centenarian, lived for about 100 years. And he was a traveling scholar as well. In the tradition of the earlier scholars, like Bukhari, he would travel vast areas over a number of years to collect the hadiths. So later scholars now, after the Salaf al-Salihin, Abu Tahir as-Silafi was also one of those traveling scholars, al-Rahal. So he traveled out of Iran and he came into the neighboring country, which is Iraq. And he settled in Baghdad for a while, and he took from some of the prominent teachers of hadith in Baghdad. So when a scholar takes hadith from a set number of scholars in a certain town or a nation, let's say Iraq or Baghdad, and he's heard those hadiths and he puts them together in a certain work, this is called al-Mashyikhah. It's taken from the scholars of Baghdad. So these are the narrations he heard from a set number of scholars in Baghdad. This is why it's called al-Mashyikhah al-Baghdadiyya. So this work, this manuscript, as I said, is very rare. This manuscript is located today in the Escorial Library. Escorial Library, where is that? It's in Spain. Let me give you some interesting facts about this, because some people would say, how can this manuscript or this narration suddenly come into Europe, and why should we accept it? I've heard this type of view in the past. How did it get into Europe, and why should we accept it? As if like having doubts about the genuineness and authenticity of this work. Well, if you don't know the history of how it got to Europe, then you shouldn't comment. Let's look at the history of this place, the Escorial Library, and how did this manuscript, Al-Mashyikhah al-Baghdadiyya, enter Spain? How did it get there? So this manuscript, it's found in a vast building complex located in San Lorenzo de El Escorial near Madrid. Okay? There are nearly 2,000 Arabic manuscripts in that library. Nearly 2,000. But actually there was around 4,000. There was a fire in the 17th century that destroyed around half. So half of that treasure was lost, and just under 2,000 was saved and stored in the Escorial Library, and they tried to bring it back, the people who owned it. Let me just mention some history. This collection actually belonged to a ruler of Morocco called Moulay Zidane. How did it end up in this royal library in Spain in the 17th century? Let me just mention the title of a work, of an article I've got. Travelling Libraries, the Arabic Manuscripts of Moulay Zidane and the Escorial Library, published in the Journal of Early Modern History, volume 18, in the year 2014, between page 535 and 558. And the author is Daniel Hirschenson, University of Connecticut in America. So this person, he wrote this article about the history of this library, and he gave lots of references in the footnotes as well to read more about this library. So he mentions on page 541 something very significant. How did this collection from Morocco end up in Spain? He said on page 541, on June the 22nd, 1612, so just over 400 years ago, a French consul turned pirate, Jehan Philippe de Castellane, stole the library of the Moroccan Sultan Moulay Zidane. Having been defeated a month earlier at Marrakesh by a local Sufi leader, Zidane decided to head south to Agadir and reorganize his forces. He had commissioned Castellane, a French merchant sent to Morocco by Louis XIII to ransom French captives to transport his boxed household goods from Safi to Agadir, in return for which Castellane was to be paid 3,000 escudos. Castellane arrived in Agadir on June the 16th, but 6 days later, when he realized that the Moroccans were not quick to pay and perhaps never intended paying him, he raised anchor, meaning his ship, and headed north, intending to reach Marseille, which is in France, where he would sell the goods to the governor of Provence. On July the 5th, near Mahdia, also known as La Mamora or San Miguel de Ultramar, Castellane's ship was intercepted by 4 Spanish galleys, meaning 4 Spanish ships, of the fleet of Luis Fajardo, admiral of the Armada of the Ocean Sea. The Spaniards arrested Castellane and his crew and took them to Lisbon, which is now, I think, the capital of Portugal, because at that time they were together, the two countries. Then part of the Spanish Empire. The French were sentenced at the Council of War, the highest military legal jurisdiction of the empire, and declared pirates, a decision that made seizing the goods they had carried a lawful prize. So this is how that manuscript collection got into Spain. And the whole of this manuscript collection has been digitized, and it was sent in the 1980s by Queen Sofia of Spain as a gift to the Alexandria Library in Egypt. The Alexandria Library, it's a port city in Egypt. So they have a copy of the original manuscript, meaning on microfiche most likely, because there wasn't digitization in the mid-80s we're talking about, on something called microfiche, like plastic sheets. So from that you can transfer it into a digital capacity as well. So I have, alhamdulillah, most of the Escorial collection. So that's how I've managed to see this narration and also show it to the public as well in my written works. So, as for the narration from Jabir bin Abdullah mentioning the Rak'ats of Tarawih, then As-Silafi mentioned it under the juz or section headed as from the hadith of Abu Muhammad al-Khallal al-Hafiz, the preserver hadith, as reported from his teacher. So in the manuscript, it's on what's called folio 118A. Folio is 2 pages. When you open up a book, they used to say, this is a folio. The 2 pages were called one folio. So how do you number each page? If that was page 1, folio 118, then one page would be called A and the other one would be called B, or Alif and Ba in Arabic. That's how they used to number the pages in the past. So folio means when you open the book, it's the 2 pages that you see. So in the manuscript, folio 118A. And let me mention the chain of transmission. You have to work out the chain of transmission as well. But let me just mention the chain of transmission. Abul Fadl Ubaidullah bin Abdul Rahman al-Zuhri transmitted to us from Muhammad bin Harun ibn Humayd al-Razi. So this again, there's an error. It shouldn't be written as this. It's a scribal error. It should actually be Muhammad ibn Harun relating from Ibn Humayd al-Razi. And I've gone into all of this in my written work, who transmitted to us from Ibrahim ibn al-Mukhtar. And notice Muhammad bin Humayd al-Razi and Ibrahim ibn al-Mukhtar and the rest of the narrators now are found in the Tariq Jurjan Sanad. So let me mention that Sanad again. From As-Silafi, Abul Fadl Ubaidullah bin Abdul Rahman al-Zuhri transmitted to us from Muhammad bin Harun from Ibn Humayd al-Razi, who transmitted to us from Ibrahim ibn al-Mukhtar, from Abdul Rahman bin Ata, from Ibn Atiq, from Jabir bin Abdullah, that the Prophet ﷺ emerged at night in Ramadan and prayed with the people 24 rakats. So 24 rakats, and Ibn Hayway transmitted to us from Ibn al-Mujallad by increasing the above wording to, and 3 rakats of witr. So the identical wording, very similar wording to that what we found in where? Tariq Jurjan. So this is the second chain, and what do we notice in this second chain? It goes back to the same Sahabi, Jabir bin Abdullah, but in the second chain, who is missing? Umar ibn Harun. Umar ibn Harun is not found in the second chain. So this is the chain we're going to use. We can strengthen the first chain using this second chain, which does not have Umar ibn Harun, who's somewhat weak. Now, I've gone into this narration at length in my work, the work being perfecting the proofs that the Prophet ﷺ performed 20 rakats of Taraweeh prayer, which you can find on darultahqiq.com. And Inshallah, when we upload this lecture in the near future, the document that I have in front of you all, inshallah, we'll put it together as a PDF so that people who are more inquisitive may want to not just listen, but go through this document as they are listening to the lecture. They can see and listen at the same time. So this I will make into a PDF, inshallah, and upload it. So they've got a dual function. Listening to what I'm saying, and they can follow the document as well in their own time. And then transmit it to lots of people, inshallah, as well. All over the world, through the platforms that are available to us today. So I say, it is said with firm conviction that the complete chain of transmission, Sanad, as presented by Al-Hafiz Abu Tahir As-Silafi in his Al-Mashaykh Al-Baghdadiyya, is at least Hasan. Good. So I've gone into proving this at length in that work that I've just mentioned, Perfecting the Proofs. And that work by itself is about 150 pages, by the way. You will see that the first half is all about As-Silafi's narration and Tariq Jurjan narration as well. And I've provided the digital images of the manuscripts as well from Oxford University Library and the Escorial Library in Spain as well. So this is the history as well, by the way. The Europeans and the Americans and the Russians, you find these Western powers, European powers, through colonialism, they managed to either buy or steal thousands of Arabic and Persian manuscripts and then put them into their storehouses, in their private collections, or in public libraries later on. And the vast majority of these manuscripts are now available as digitized forms, either online or you go to the libraries themselves and request a copy. So knowledge has become accessible today as well. And the powerhouse, which has the most Arabic manuscripts closest to Europe, is Turkey, Istanbul. We can say more than 200,000 Arabic and Persian and Turkish manuscripts exist in Turkey. And the vast majority of them have been digitized as well. And some of these manuscripts are, yes, they're very old, hundreds of years old. Some of them are actually in the handwriting of the authors as well, which is very rare. What you will find that the vast majority of the literature that's ascribed to the Imams of the Sallallahu, alaihi, you're not going to find those works in the handwriting of the Imams. So you're not going to find Bukhari, Sahih al-Bukhari in the handwriting of Bukhari, or Muslims, Sahih in his handwriting, and so on. Or the works attributed to Abu Hanifa, Malik, Shafi, Ahmed, Al-Awza'i, Sufyan al-Thawri, you won't find. But some of the later scholars you find, like Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, some of his works, their handwritten copies are available in Turkey. Imam al-Zahabi, before him, some of his handwritten works are available in Turkey. Qasim bin Qutlubugha, the student of Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, you'll find some of his handwritten works available in Istanbul, Turkey. And I've got these works myself, I've seen them. The digital edition, some works by other scholars as well, available. So let's say that this chain of transmission is Hasan. But if you was to dispute this now, you would come to the conclusion that it's weak. No one can prove that it's a forgery, inshallah. This one that I've just mentioned from Al-Mashaykh Al-Baghdadiyya, because none of the people within there are found to be forgers of hadith, deliberate forgers of hadith. But if you come to the conclusion that this narration that I've just mentioned from Tariq Jurjan and Al-Mashaykh Al-Baghdadiyya is weak, just say it's weak. Though I dispute that. Just say it's weak. Can we not strengthen it still with another narration? Yes, we can. And that narration is the more popular narration that has been known for hundreds of years and mentioned by a lot of the Imams of the four schools, the Hanafi school, the Maliki school, the Shafi school, the Hanbali school. And that's the narration attributed back to the famous Sahabi Abdullah ibn Abbas. So this is the common one that the scholars know of. Very few have known of the Jabir bin Abdullah one. Why? Because the manuscripts were not easy to find. Tariq Jurjan, as I said, only published in 1950. Al-Mashaykh Al-Baghdadi only printed a few years ago. But even though it's been printed a few years ago, very few people know of it even now. So we're making it more popular and making it more known to this lecture and through the print medium as well. And I provided the manuscript just in case, the image from the manuscript just in case people say you've made it up. It's not the case. The manuscript is genuine, and there are other parts of this manuscript available in Turkey, the Faydullah Effendi collection, in Damascus, the Zahiriya collection. But the section which has this narration from Jabir bin Abdullah is only found in the manuscript in the Escorial Library, and it's an old manuscript as well. So, the other narration is from Abdullah ibn Abbas. So we've said, just for argument's sake, you dispute with us, it's not Hasan, the Jabir bin Abdullah narration is not good. You say the chain is weak. Then we can say we have another narration that you know of, meaning those who do 8 rakats, attributed to Abdullah ibn Abbas. So Abdullah ibn Abbas' narration is more popular, well known, and you can find it in a number of manuscripts that have not been published or have been published. But let's mention the more popular book that many scholars know of, has been around and available in certain parts of the Muslim world, which has this narration from Ibn Abbas. It's called the Musannaf of Abu Bakr ibn Abi Shaybah, died 235 after the Hijrah. A well-known Imam, is a teacher of Bukhari and Imam Muslim and so on. So in this work, Musannaf ibn Abi Shaybah, he is given a narration, and I'm quoting the chain of transmission from the Musannaf of Ibn Abi Shaybah. Yazid bin Harun transmitted to us. Ibn Abi Shaybah said, Yazid bin Harun, who's a well-known scholar of hadith, transmitted to us by saying, Ibrahim ibn Uthman related to us from Al-Hakam, from Miqsam, from Ibn Abbas, that the Prophet ﷺ would pray in Ramadan 20 rakats and the witr. So, the problem with this chain of transmission is only one-fold. And that is, there is a sub-narrator in there called Ibrahim ibn Uthman. Ibrahim ibn Uthman is also known as Abu Shaybah. So Abu Shaybah, that's his kunya, agnomen. Abu Shaybah, Ibrahim ibn Uthman, he's actually the grandfather of Abu Bakr ibn Abi Shaybah, the author of the Musannaf. So his grandfather, he was actually a judge. He was a qadi in Wasit, a place called Wasit. But as a scholar of hadith or a transmitter of hadith, his overall grading is weak, da'if. Okay, that's why this chain of transmission, the vast majority of the scholars have determined it to be weak, but not agreed upon as well. I will mention someone else who said something better than weak, meaning Hasan, later on. So this narration is well known, is famous, and is usually the one that people quote as a marfu, a raised back. Marfu means raised back to the Prophet ﷺ hadith, going back to Ibn Abbas. This is the popular one that many scholars quote and have mentioned in their works, in fiqh books especially. Now this narration, you will find, I've mentioned and I've shown digital images in my other work, the Perfecting the Proofs work, that you can find the same narration in Al-Muntakhab min Musnad of Abd bin Humayd. This has been published. You can find it in Fawaid Abu Bakr al-Naysaburi. You can find it in Al-Juz al-Awwal والثاني من حديث of Abu Ishaq Ibrahim bin Abi Thabit, died 338 after the Hijrah. You can find it in Al-Mu'jam al-Kabir of Al-Tabarani, died 360 after the Hijrah. And also Tabarani's Al-Mu'jam al-Awsat. You can find it Al-Kamil fi Du'afa al-Rijal of Abu Ahmed ibn Adi, died 365 after the Hijrah. You can find it also in Juz min Hadith Abil Hasan Muhammad ibn Talha al-Niyali, died 431 after the Hijrah. You can find it in As-Sunan al-Kubra of Al-Bayhaqi, died 458 after the Hijrah. You can find it in Al-Mudih lil-Jam wal-Tafriq by Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi, who died 463 after the Hijrah. You can find in Tariq Baghdad by the same Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi. You can find it mentioned by Al-Hafiz ibn Abdul Bar al-Maliki, died 463 after the Hijrah, in it Al-Tamhid lima fil Muwatta min al-Ma'ani wal-Asanid. You can find it in Al-Muntakhab min al-Fawaid of Abu Umar Abdul Wahhab ibn Mandah, died 475 after the Hijrah. You can find it in Mashikha Abi Tahir ibn Abil Sakr, died 476 after the Hijrah. You can find it in Zail Tariq Baghdad of Ibn al-Najjar, who died 643 after the Hijrah. You can find it also from Abul Qasim Abdullah bin Muhammad al-Baghawi, died 317 after the Hijrah. And this has been mentioned by Imam al-Zahabi in his Mizan al-I'tidal, and Imam Jalaluddin al-Suyuti mentioned that it was actually recorded by al-Baghawi in his Mu'jam. You can find it mentioned by Abu Bakr Abdul Aziz al-Hanbali, who is also known as Ghulam Khallal, died 363 after the Hijrah, in his Al-Shafi fil Fiqh. So I've given you 16 references besides Musannaf ibn Abi Shaybah. And all of these works, they give their chains of transmission, but all of them come through Ibrahim ibn Uthman. Abu Shaybah, Ibrahim ibn Uthman. So therefore they don't strengthen each other. Why? Because even though I've given you 17 chains, collected by 17 authors in total. All of them run through one individual. They all contain Ibrahim ibn Uthman. So you can't say, let's get all these 17 chains together and they all strengthen each other, collective weight. No. It doesn't work like that. Why? Because every single chain has Ibrahim ibn Uthman in it. Okay? So this chain, that's the problem. In Musannaf ibn Abi Shaykh, Ibrahim ibn Uthman is considered to be somewhat weak. So let's mention what Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani says in Taqrib al-Tahzib. He says about Ibrahim ibn Uthman under 215, under number 215, Matruk al-Hadith, meaning abandoning hadith. Imam Ibn Hajar says Matruk al-Hadith about Ibrahim ibn Uthman. But like I said earlier, Ibn Hajar, sometimes he has more to say about the same narrator somewhere else in another book. So he has said some other things about him. So Al-Hafiz Ibn Hajar in his Al-Talkhis al-Habir, he said about Ibrahim ibn Uthman, he was very weak, meaning da'if jiddan, very weak. While in his book Al-Matalib al-Aliyah, Ibn Hajar has another book called Al-Matalib al-Aliyah, he said Ibrahim ibn Uthman is simply weak, da'if. Look, he has three views. Despite giving these different gradings, Ibn Hajar has given the ruling that the narration from Ibn Abbas has a weak, meaning da'if chain of transmission. This narration of Ibn Abbas, Ibn Hajar has given a grading to this narration, where in his book Al-Diraya fi Takhrij Ahadith Al-Hidayah, and in his commentary to Sahih Bukhari called Fathul Bari. So I've given all of the references, the precise page numbers. So Ibn Hajar in two works, Al-Diraya fi Takhrij Ahadith Al-Hidayah, as I said, some of the works of these Imams are available in their handwriting. I have a copy of this from Istanbul in his handwriting, and so this edition in his handwriting was edited. There's a new edition of Al-Diraya available on the market in, I think, 3 volumes, and this is the best edition. This 3-volume edition used the handwritten copy of Al-Diraya. What is Al-Diraya fi Takhrij Ahadith Al-Hidayah? Is Imam Ibn Hajar, he goes over the famous Hanafi fiqh manual called Al-Hidayah of Burhanuddin al-Marghinani. He goes into the narrations in that work, but actually it's a continuation. He used another work before his time called Nasab al-Raya by Imam al-Zaylai. He used Zaylai's work and he would add his own gradings at times, or certain things that Zaylai might have missed. So Ibn Hajar al-Diraya, he's gone into the narrations that have been mentioned in this fiqh work, the Hanafi fiqh work, and you'll see some things that he's graded are to the advantage of the Hanafi school as well. For example, someone was talking about Raful Yadain, raising the hand before ruku' and coming up from ruku'. You find that Al-Zaylai has mentioned some of these narrations that are used by the Hanafi school for not raising the hands after the initial takbir. Okay? And then Zaylai was Hanafi, but Imam Ibn Hajar was not Hanafi, he was Shafi'i. You find in Al-Diraya, Ibn Hajar has authenticated some of the chains of transmission for non-Raful Yadain. This is a Shafi'i grading, pro-Hanafi Dalail. And it's not just pro-Hanafi Dalail, it's not just the Hanafis that don't do Raful Yadain after the first takbir. It's also the dominant view of the Maliki madhab. It's Imam Malik's view. Because some people think, oh, it's just Hanafis. The lay people out there, in the Western world especially, oh, it's just the Hanafis who don't do it. This is wrong to claim that. It's the dominant position of the Maliki school. Imam Malik is on record as saying, actually, to raise the hands after the first takbir is a da'if opinion. It's a weak opinion. If someone says, where's this? Al-Mudawwana al-Kubra of Qadi Sahnun. It's in there. This is a famous work within the Maliki school. They give chains going back to Imam Malik. And Sufyan al-Thawri, who's called Amir al-Mu'minin fil Hadith. He's a contemporary of Abu Hanifa. He has the same view. That's 3. That's 3 madhabs from early times. And outside Ahlul Sunnah, these are all Sunnis. They're Sunni madhab. Outside Ahlul Sunnah as well, there are others who don't raise their hands. Who? Zaydiyah, Zaydi Shia, and Ibadiyah, a form of Khawarij, the Khariji sect in Oman, not Yemen, Oman, next door. In Yemen you have the Zaydiyah, and next door Oman you have the Ibadiyah. These are not Ahlul Sunnah. The Ibadiyah are a branch of the Khawarij sect, and the Zaydiyah are a type of Shia. This is 3 schools, 3 sects, I should say. Sunni, Ibadi, and Zaydi, saying you only raise your hands at the beginning. So whoever attacks the Hanafis, the person hasn't done his homework. You shouldn't talk like this unless you've done your research and know your Islamic history before you comment. So let's continue. So Ibn Hajar, he gives a grading of this hadith from Ibn Abbas that's found in Musannaf Ibn Abi Shaybah to be da'if. Okay. Now there are other scholars who've graded this hadith as well. We're being balanced. I'm not going to say I'm going to hide these gradings because it's not in my interest. Because this narration is for me because I perform 20 rakats of Tarawih. So why should I tell people that it's weak? I'm not going to be like that. I'm going to be a balanced and academic. So there are others. Imam al-Nawawi, al-Shafi'i, died 676 after the Hijrah in his Khulasatul Ahkam. He has mentioned that it's weak, the Ibn Abbas narration. He mentioned that Al-Bayhaqi and others had weakened the narration from Ibn Abbas. So he mentions Bayhaqi before his time. Al-Hafiz Shamsuddin al-Zahabi, another Shafi'i scholar, died 748 after the Hijrah. He's mentioned about the chain of transmission for this narration from Al-Baghawi in his Mizan al-Ittidal. And he's mentioned the problems with Ibrahim ibn Uthman as well. And then Al-Zaylai, the Hanafi scholar that I mentioned, Nasab al-Raya, he has mentioned the narration from Ibn Abbas in the Nasab al-Raya. And he also claimed that there's agreement on the weakness of Abu Shaybah Ibrahim ibn Uthman. And that's not correct, to be honest. There is some praise on Ibrahim ibn Uthman. Praise comes from Yazid bin Harun. Yazid bin Harun is the first narrator in the chain. Musannaf ibn Abi Shaybah that I quoted, Abu Bakr ibn Abi Shaybah, he quotes from Yazid bin Harun. And Yazid bin Harun, as I said, he was a very prominent scholar of hadith. Yazid bin Harun, he is the one who narrates it from Ibrahim ibn Uthman, who's the one we're saying is weak. Yazid bin Harun did praise his teacher Ibrahim ibn Uthman, and I've given that evidence in my longer work, Perfecting the Proof. So Zaylai says that, there is weakness on this narration in Nasib al-Raya. Al-Hafiz Nuruddin al-Haythami that I mentioned before, the author of Majma' al-Zawaid, he mentions this narration from Tabrani's Al-Kabir, Mu'jam al-Kabir and Mu'jam al-Awsat, and he mentioned that Abu Shaybah is da'if, weak. Al-Hafiz Ahmed al-Busayri died 840 after the Hijrah. He mentions the narration of Ibn Abbas in his Ittihaf al-Khiyara and recorded by Al-Bayhaqi, and said that Ibrahim bin Uthman in the chain and he is weak. Imam Kamaluddin ibn al-Humam, a Hanafi scholar, died 861 after the Hijrah. He mentioned the narration of Ibn Abbas in his Fath al-Qadir. What's Fath al-Qadir? It's a commentary to Al-Hidayah of Al-Marghinani. And he said that the narrator was da'if with the claim that there is agreement on the weakness of Abu Shaybah Ibrahim ibn Uthman. As I've said, that's not true, because Yazid bin Harun did praise his teacher Ibrahim ibn Uthman. Al-Hafiz Jalaluddin al-Suyuti, he's mentioned the narration from Ibn Abbas in his Tanwir al-Hawalik, Shar Muwatta Imam Malik, commentary to Muwatta by the famous Suyuti, where he mentioned that it is weak, while he graded it as severely weak, da'if jiddan, in his Al-Masabi fi Salatil Taraweeh. So Suyuti has a risala, a short work, on the Rak'ats of Taraweeh as well. And then Imam Shihabuddin al-Qastalani, another Shafi, died 923 after the Hijrah. He mentioned the narration from Ibn Abbas in his Al-Irshad al-Sari li-Sharh Sahih al-Bukhari, and said that the chain of transmission is da'if. He said likewise in his Al-Mawahib al-Laduniya, Qastalani. Imam Ali al-Qari, a Hanafi scholar, he mentioned the weakness of the narration from Ibn Abbas in his Mirkatul Mafati Sharh Mishkatul Masabi. The Mishkatul Masabi by Imam Waliuddin al-Tabrizi, that studied in the Darul Ulums, in the Indian subcontinent and in the West. He's written a nice commentary called Mirkatul Mafatih, Ali al-Qari. And he's mentioned this weakness by quoting Ibn al-Humam that we mentioned earlier. And Imam, then we have Muhammad bin Abdul Baqi al-Zarqani, a Maliki scholar, died 1122 after the Hijrah. He's mentioned the Ibn Abbas narration and his weakness in his Sharh al-Muwahib al-Laduniya al-Qastalani. So there were other scholars who said likewise in weakening the narration of Ibn Abbas, and these examples are sufficient. There are others we can mention later. But as for Abu Shaybah Ibrahim ibn Uthman and his chain of transmission back to Ibn Abbas, then we now know, based on our previous discussion up to this point, that he is supported, meaning independently, another chain of transmission, in his account by the narration going back to which Sahabi? Jabir bin Abdullah, where? In Al-Mashyikhah Al-Baghdadiyya of Al-Hafiz Abu Tahir As-Silafi. And we have to get this name right as well, because some people mispronounce the name and they say Abu Tahir As-Salafi. It's spelled the same, but it's not pronounced correctly. It is actually As-Silafi. And there's an origin to that name as well. It's to do with a deformity with the lips, cleft lip. Okay, not that he may have had it, but maybe one of his ancestors. Al-Hafiz Abu Tahir al-Silafi was a Shafi'i scholar. He was a Hafiz of Hadith, and if you look at his background, he was also a Sufi. Because some people today, they have problem with Sufis, but they admire Abu Tahir al-Silafi. That's why I'm mentioning this. Go and read his biography, you see he was Shafi'i, Hafiz of Hadith, and Sufi as well. As were many of the earlier scholars of Hadith. Like whom? Someone may say whom? Abu Nu'aym al-Isfahani. He has Arba'in collection on the Sufis. On the virtues of the Sufis I'm talking about. And so on. So, note one thing. All of these scholars I've mentioned up till now, all of these names you've been hearing up till now, none of the above scholars, you can say confidently, mentioned the narrations presented in this discourse, this lecture. From where? Tarikh Jurjana wal Hafiz al-Sahmi. Hamza bin Yusuf al-Sahmi. Nor al-Mashayikh al-Baghdadi of al-Hafiz Abu Tahir al-Silafi. And so they were not in a position to strengthen the narration from Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. Because they missed it. It existed, but they didn't encounter the two works that we've just mentioned today. That's why they've not mentioned it as a evidence. If they came across it, they would have mentioned it. That's the way of the research scholars, muhakkikun. So this narration, if we bring the Ibn Abbas narration and we bring the Jabir bin Abdullah narration, we bring them both together using the principles of hadith. If we say both of the chains of transmission are weak for argument's sake, then they corroborate each other, they strengthen each other, and the overall grading is Hasan. Hasan. We can say the Ibn Abbas narration is Hasan li ghayrihi. Hasan due to supporting narration. What's the supporting narration? The Jabir narration, found in As-Silafi's work and Tarikh Jurjan of Al-Sahmi. So, but again, this is not all scholars said the Ibn Abbas narration is weak, by the way. A later Hafiz of Hadith, that's acceptable to a lot of scholars, from the last Islamic century, from Morocco, was a famous scholar of Hadith, a traveling scholar, who had many chains of transmission, and an expert on those who transmitted the Hadith works. His name is Al-Hafiz Muhammad Abdul Hayy Al-Kattani. Died in 1962 in exile in France. So he was from Morocco, and he was given the title of Hafiz of Hadith, memorized thousands of Hadiths, and an expert on the biographies of the famous scholars of Hadith as well. And he was from Fez, or Fas as they say in Arabic. He has mentioned in his book, Munya As-Sa'il Khulasa Ash-Shama'il. This work, which is on the characteristics of the Prophet Sallallahu, alaihi wasallam, okay, has been published in English as well, been translated into English, okay, an abridged version of it. You go back to the Arabic edition, page 130 to 131, first edition 2005, Markaz al-Turath al-Thaqafi al-Maghribi, which is available online. You can find this work. Munya As-Sa'il Khulasa al-Shama'il. With his chain of transmission, he mentions it from a manuscript of Al-Muntakhab bin Musnad of Abd bin Humayd. At that time it was a manuscript, but it's been published after his death. What does Abdul Hayy Al-Kattani mention in this book? Al-Kattani said, and some of the later scholars have made clarification of it being Hasan, good from the totality of its roots, meaning the Ibn Abbas narration. So this is a grading of a later Hafiz of Hadith, and we can use his quotation. So therefore, we come to the conclusion that the narration, the Ibn Abbas narration, can be used as an evidence because it's supported by the Jabir narration, which was already declared to be Hasan in the chain of transmission. Now, moving on now to the time of the Sahaba. As I've said, certain number of rakats were performed by the Sahaba in congregation, we're talking about now, not individually, in the time of which Khalif? Umar ibn al-Khattab. So this is part 2 now. Okay. In the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab, certain number of rakats were performed, and we say for sure it was 20 rakats, because we've proven, inshallah, that the Prophet ﷺ performed 20 rakats, and the Sahaba were not innovators. They followed what the Prophet ﷺ did to the letter. If he performed 20 rakats Taraweeh, they did 20 rakats Taraweeh, because they witnessed 20 rakats Taraweeh in Masjid al-Nabawi for those 3 nights. And so, let us mention what was the rakat in the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second Khalif. in the Musnad of Ali ibn al-Jad. Ali ibn al-Jad is a teacher of Imam al-Bukhari. Musnad of Ali ibn al-Jad that was published just a few years ago, he mentions a chain of transmission through this route from Ibn Abi Dhib, from Yazid bin Husayfa. Remember this name, Yazid bin Husayfa. It's important to remember this name. From a Sahabi called As-Sa'ib bin Yazid. As-Sa'ib bin Yazid. So As-Sa'ib bin Yazid, what does he say? In the time of Umar radiallahu anhu, they would stand, meaning the people would stand to perform 20 rakats in the month of Ramadan. And they would recite the mean from the Quran. What's the mean? A group of medium-sized chapters from the Quran. Medium-sized chapters from the Quran. So this narration in Musnad of Ali ibn al-Jad, I've given you the chain. Is it sahih or not? So this is something we need to investigate. Let's quote the authorities. Now, when this work was published, Shaykh Shu'aib al-Arnaud, who died about 2.5 years ago, he came across it, the Musnad Ali ibn al-Jad, and he gives a grading. He says in his editing of Jami al-Tirmidhi, under volume 2, page 327, footnote 1, he says, this chain of transmission is sahih, meaning the one in Musnad Ali ibn al-Jad, upon the condition of al-Bukhari, meaning it fulfills the criteria of Imam al-Bukhari, and Yazid bin Husayfa is trustworthy thiqah. So this shows that Shaykh Shu'aib al-Arnaud, he authenticated the chain of transmission. Now this chain of transmission, as I've said, it contains Yazid bin Husayfa, and this was collated by Ali ibn al-Jad. We have another chain of transmission that doesn't have Ali ibn al-Jad in it now. This is after Ali ibn al-Jad's time, and this is a narration found in Kitab al-Siyam, the book of fasting, Kitab al-Siyam, by Imam Abu Bakr Ja'far bin Muhammad al-Firyabi, died 301 after the Hijrah. He mentions a chain not containing Ali ibn al-Jad, and that chain is from Tamim bin al-Muntasir, relating from Yazid bin Harun. Remember Yazid bin Harun? He was in the chain in the Musannaf of Ibn Abi Shaybah, going back 420 rakats to Ibn Abbas. Yazid bin Harun from Ibn Abi Dhib, from Ibn Husayfa. So it's again Yazid bin Husayfa is in the Sanad, from the Sahabi As-Sa'ib bin Yazid. And how does the narration go? Sa'ib bin Yazid said, they would stand to perform 20 rakats in the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab, but they were reciting 200 verses in a rakah, and they would lean on their sticks due to the severity of standing, meaning they stood for such a long time. And you can imagine the perfection of the recitation. None of this speed reading. Perfect recitation, taking their time, and some people were getting tired. And some of the Sahaba, they were leaning on sticks, staffs, with one arm, I'm talking about. And this narration mentions 20 rakats and approximately 200 verses in a rakat as well. 200 sometimes, maybe more, sometimes maybe less, approximately 200 verses. So again, this sanad contains Yazid bin Husayfa. This is important to remember this name, Yazid bin Husayfa. This, again, this narration with a slightly different wording comes in a later hadith scholars collection, which is this later scholar, Imam al-Bayhaqi, in his As-Sunan al-Kubra. So what we find, a lot of the later scholars, after 500 AH, after Bayhaqi's time, when they give the evidence for 20 rakats of Taraweeh, quoting a narration and evidence, who did they usually refer to? Very few people had access to Musnad Ali ibn al-Jad or Kitab al-Siyam or Firyabi. They usually generally say Bayhaqi is mentioned in his Sunan al-Kubra, or his other work, Ma'rifat al-Sunan, or As-Sunan al-Saghir. They would usually give reference to Bayhaqi, who was very famous Imam. Okay, so after 500 AH, those scholars who are providing evidences for their school of thought, their school of jurisprudence, madhab, they would usually say Bayhaqi has narrated it with this narration from the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab for 20 rakats. So that's why we're going to find that they're authenticating Bayhaqi's narration, because they didn't have access to the earlier works of Ali ibn al-Ja'ad, very few did, or Kitab al-Siyam. Both of these Imam came before Bayhaqi. Bayhaqi died 458 after the Hijrah. So Bayhaqi in As-Sunan al-Kubra, on the number 4288, he gives a chain of transmission which runs through Ali ibn al-Jad, the author of the Musnad. He gives a chain, it's a longer chain because it's later. The later you live, the longer your chain is going to be to the Prophet ﷺ or to the Sahaba. He gives a chain, he's going through this route. Abu Abdullah al-Hussain bin Muhammad ibn al-Hussain bin Finjaway al-Dinawari, from Ahmed bin Muhammad bin Ishaq as-Sunni, from Abdullah bin Muhammad bin Abdul Aziz al-Baghawi, from Ali ibn al-Ja'd, the author of the Musnad. And then the chain, as we find in Musnad Ali ibn al-Ja'd, and going back to the Sahabi Sa'ib bin Yazid, and the wording this time is, they would stand to perform 20 rakats in the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab during the month of Ramadan. They would recite 200 verses and they would lean on their sticks during the time of Uthman ibn Affan due to the severity of standing so long. So this narration is saying, look, it's not just in the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab that they were doing 20 and leaning on their sticks, but even after, in the time of Uthman ibn Affan, then the third Khalif, the same practice continued. Okay, this chain of transmission that I've just mentioned from Bayhaqi Sunan al-Kubra, you find in this Fadail al-Awqat as well, number 127. Bayhaqi has also given a different route, going back to the same Sahabi, though, Sa'ib bin Yazid, where in his Ma'rifat al-Sunan, through this route, from Abu Tahir al-Faqih, from Abu Usman al-Basri, from Abu Ahmed Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab, from Khalid bin Makhlad, from Muhammad bin Jafar, from Yazid bin Khusayfa. So all of these chains, who do they contain commonly? We found all of these chains that I've mentioned so far, all of them contain who? Yazid bin Khusayfa in them. Yazid bin Khusayfa from Sa'ib bin Yazid, the Sahabi, but the wording this time is, we would stand in the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab for 20 rakats and the witr. But the wording is identical. The commonality is what? The common feature is what? 20 rakats of Taraweeh. Through all of these routes is one common narrator, who? Yazid bin Khusayfa. And Yazid bin Khusayfa is what's known as a thiqqa rawi, a trustworthy transmitter of hadith. Now, as for the above narration from Al-Bayhaqi that I've just mentioned, from his Sunan al-Kubra and Ma'rifat al-Sunan, the scholars knew of it, as I've said, later times, and they have authenticated this narration. Let's mention some of these examples. So, major scholars who authenticated the narration in Al-Bayhaqi's As-Sunan al-Kubra or his Ma'rifat al-Sunan. So, let's just mention some examples. Imam al-Nawawi. Most people who are into practicing the deen have heard of Imam al-Nawawi. In the West, I'm talking about. Died 676 after the Hijrah. He's authenticated the chain of transmission from Bayhaqi's As-Sunan al-Kubra in where? In Al-Majmu' Shar al-Muhaddab. Imam al-Nawawi also declared Bayhaqi's Sanad to be Sahih in his what? Khulasatul Ahkam. Imam Fakhruddin al-Zaylai. This is another Zaylai, not the other one that I mentioned, the author of Nasab al-Raya. This is Fakhruddin al-Zaylai, died 743 after the Hijrah. He authenticated the chain of transmission from Bayhaqi in his Tabyin al-Haqa'iq. This is a work on Hanafi fiqh. Imam Taqiyuddin as-Subki, a Shafi'i scholar, died 756 after the Hijrah. He authenticated the Sanad in his from Bayhaqi's Ma'rifat al-Sunan, where? In Shar al-Minhaj. And this has been quoted by Imam as-Suyuti in his Al-Masabi fi Salat al-Taraweeh from as-Subki. The Shafi'i scholar Ibn al-Mulaqid died 804 after the Hijrah in his Al-Badr al-Munir, also declared the Sanad from Bayhaqi to be Sahih. Then we have the Shafi'i scholar Waliyuddin al-Iraqi, died 826 after the Hijrah, in his Tarh al-Tatrib fi Shar al-Taqrib, mentioning the Bayhaqi narration and declaring the chain of transmission to be what? Sahih, authentic. And then, a few lines later in this work, Imam Waliyuddin al-Iraqi, he's mentioned that Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Sufyan al-Thawri, Imam al-Shafi'i, and Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal, and the Jumhur, meaning the majority of the scholars, ulama, according to Ibn Abdul Barr al-Maliki, were upon 20 rakats of Taraweeh, and this was like an agreement, ijma, kal ijma. What did I say? That we're going to quote two sources of the Sharia, the Sunnah, meaning the Hadiths, and then third source of Sharia, ijma, agreement. So Waliyuddin al-Iraqi is mentioned that his own father, Imam Zainuddin al-Iraqi, he would perform 20 rakats of Taraweeh, and then later on in the night, he would perform 16 rakats. The Shafi'i scholar and commentator of Sahih al-Bukhari, Imam al-Kastalani, has also mentioned this narration from Bayhaqi, and he's quoted Waliyuddin al-Iraqi in his Irshad al-Sari. The Hanafi scholar Imam Badruddin al-Aini in his Al-Binaya fi Shar al-Hidayah, the commentary to Al-Hidayah al-Marghinani, also clarified 20 rakats is the madhab of the Hanafis, as well as being the view of Imam al-Shafi'i, Ahmed ibn Hanbal, the view of the majority according to a certain al-Qadi, He doesn't give the name who this Qadi is. And he's also mentioned that Imam Malik's view is actually for 9 tarweehat. So what is a tarweeh? 4 rakats. You know, when we pray Tarawih, what do we do after every 4 rakats? We take a brief rest. So this is why it's called Tarawih. Tarawih is the plural of Tarweeh, because we have these brief rest periods after every 4 rakats. So in Medina, what would happen in Makkah in the time of Imam Malik and the Khalifa at that time, just before his time, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, in his time, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz's time, what would happen is in Makkah al-Mukarramah, the people used to do 4 rakats, and during the rest period, what some people would do, they would do tawaf around the Kaaba, and others would just take a break, and then they'd move on to the next 4 rakats until they completed 20 rakats. But in Medina, obviously, you can't do tawaf. What would they do after 4 rakats with the Imam or Imams? They would pray another 4 rakats individually. Now you add that up. If you pray 4 rakats with the Imam and then you pray 4 rakats individually, nafal, you're going to get 20 rakats behind the Imam and 16 rakats praying individually, going on in Masjid al-Nabawi in the time of Imam Malik and Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, the Khalif in Medina. So 20 plus 16, 36 rakats was performed in Medina al-Munawwara in the time of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, a noble Khalif. And then practice was inherited by Imam Malik ibn Anas. And that's the fatwa of Imam Malik, 36 rakats. So it's actually 20 rakats, but 16 individually, 3 rakats with the Imam, and then 2 rakats by yourself, nafal. That's how many rakats? 41 rakats. And that's not just Imam Malik's view. There's another Imam after Imam Malik called Ishaq ibn Rahawayh, who's the teacher of Al-Bukhari. He held that view as well. And by the way, it is down to Imam Ishaq ibn Rahawayh's nasiha, advice to his student Al-Bukhari, that Al-Bukhari traveled for some 16 years to collate what became known as Sahih al-Bukhari. So Ishaq ibn Rahawayh, his view is also for 41 rakats. But in essence, it's 20 rakats still. So this is Imam Malik's view. So Imam Badruddin al-Aini, in his book Al-Binaya, that we just mentioned, volume 1, page 660, Al-Aini authenticated Al-Bayhaqi's sanad as found in As-Sunnah al-Kubra, as well as quoting from Ibn Qudama al-Maqdisi al-Hanbali, who died before his time, died 620 after the Hijrah, from his Al-Mughni, that 20 rakat was like an ijma, an agreement, like an ijma. Okay, moving on. Imam Badruddin al-Aini, also in his commentary to Sahih al-Bukhari, called Umdatul Qari, volume 7, page 177, he's also mentioned similarly to what is mentioned in Binaya, and he's also mentioned the sanad from Bayhaqi's Sunan al-Kubra, and he's also mentioned our companions, meaning the Hanafis, the Shafi'is and Hanbalis say 20 rakats. And we know Malik said more, based on the individual 16 rakats, 20 plus 16. Then we have Suyuti, Imam Jalaluddin Suyuti, died 911 after the Hijrah. He also authenticated Bayhaqi's narration in his Al-Masabi fi Salat al-Tarawih. And then we have a Shaykh Zakaria al-Ansari called Shaykh al-Islam in the Shafi school. Died 926 after the Hijrah. In his Fath al-Wahhab Minhaj al-Tullab has not only affirmed 20 rakat, but also declared one of al-Bayhaq's chain of transmission to be Sahih as well. Shaykh Zakaria al-Ansari also authenticated in his Asna al-Matalib fi Shar Rawd al-Talib. Then we have the Hanafi faqih Imam Ibrahim al-Halabi, died 956 after the Hijrah, in his Ghunyatul Mutamalli, also known as Al-Kabiri. In the Indian subcontinent they call it Al-Kabiri. He also mentioned Bayhaqi's chain and authenticated by saying this sanad is Sahih. Then we have the Shafi faqih Al-Khatib al-Shirbini, died 977 after the Hijrah, in his Mughni al-Muhtaj, declaring Bayhaqi's sanad to be Sahih. Then we have the Hanafi Imam Ali al-Qari, died 1014, mentioning Bayhaqi's sanad in his Shar al-Nuqaya, the Hanafi fiqh manual. And he's mentioned that Bayhaqi is narrated with a chain which is Sahih. And also Ali al-Qari talks about this in his Mirkat al-Mafati, the commentary to Mishkat al-Masabi. And he's mentioned the narration from Bayhaqi's Ma'rifat al-Sunan this time. And he's mentioned Imam Nawawi authenticating it in his Khulasatul Ahkam. So I've already mentioned Imam Nawawi's verdict. Then we have the Hanafi Hafiz of Hadith, Imam Murtada al-Zabidi, died 1205 after the Hijrah, in his commentary to Imam al-Ghazali Ihya Ulumuddin called Ittihaf al-Sa'adat al-Muttaqeen, volume 3, page 415. He's also mentioned Bayhaqi's sanad and he's declared it to be Sahih. Okay, Imam Zabidi also mentioned that, 20 rakats of Taraweeh is the view of the major Imams like Abu Hanifa, An-Nawawi, Ash-Shafi'i, Ahmed ibn Hanbal, the majority. And the preferred choice of Ibn Abdul Barr. And I'll quote Ibn Abdul Barr later on when we finish, inshallah. Then we have Shaykh Sulaiman al-Bujayrimi al-Shafi'i, died 1221 after the Hijrah. So I'm going systematically, century after century more or less. In his Hashiyah, Notes to Shar min Hajatul Lab, he declared Bayhaqi Sanad to be Sahih. And the Shafi'i Mufti after, Abu Bakr al-Dimyati, died 1310 after the Hijrah, in his Iyanatul Talibin, also mentioned Bayhaqi's chain and mentioned its authenticity. And then in the Indian subcontinent, the last Islamic century, Shaykh Muhammad Ali al-Nimawi, died 1322 after the Hijrah. He mentioned Bayhaqi's Sanad from the Sunan al-Kubra, and he's declared to be Sahih, where in his Athar al-Sunan, page 251. And Athar al-Sunan has been translated into English as well. It's available here in local bookshop like As-Subah Academy and so on. Now, I've mentioned all of these scholars, and they're from the classical madhabs, like the Hanafi school, the Shafi school. Okay, these Imams that we mentioned. How about Salafi scholars then? Because not all Salafis adhere to the view of 8 rakats. Some of the Salafis of the last few decades I'm talking about, they accept 20 rakats. And where are they from? Usually from outside the Indian subcontinent. Okay, some of the Arab Salafis have accepted 20 rakats of Tarawih, and they've authenticated the 20 rakats narrations. But unfortunately, it seems to be the non-Arab Salafis who are determined to promote the view of 8 rakats and go to the extreme of declaring those who perform more than 8 rakats to be innovators or performing an innovation, bid'ah. And who is the person who introduced this fitna? The first person that I've ever come across who said to exceed 8 rakats is an innovation is the late Muhammad Nasiruddin al-Albani, died 1999. And we're now in 2019, and today, inshallah, is the day of mid-Sha'ban, the 15th of Sha'ban, 1440 after the Hijrah, according to one view. And 20 years ago he passed away, but he wrote a work called Salatul Taraweeh, the Rak'ats of Salatul Taraweeh. In there he advocates his peculiar and unusual stance that he couldn't call anyone from the Salaf holding this position, as far as I'm aware, that to go over 8 rakats is a bid'ah. And he did his utmost to weaken the 20 rakat narrations. And he quoted the famous ones, but he did not know of the one from As-Silafis al-Mashikha al-Baghdadiyya. Why? Because he didn't come across the manuscript. He did know of the Tarikh Jurjan one. He did know of that one because that work, as I said, was published in 1950. So that was in his time. But the Mashikha al-Baghdadiyya he didn't know of. He didn't come across the manuscript to analyze and give a view. So, let's quote some of their scholars. Did I not mention earlier on, Tarikh Jurjan was edited by whom? Abdul Rahman al-Muallimi al-Yemeni, died 1386 after the Hijrah, around 1966. This Shaykh, he has a book called Kitab Qiyam Ramadan, book on standing in Ramadan, meaning the Rak'ats of Taraweeh and the virtues of Ramadan and so on. In this book of his, page 57, Maktaba al-Makkiyya, first edition, Makkah, 1997, he has mentioned Bayhaqi's narration from As-Sunan al-Kubra, and he declared it to be Sahih. So this is a Salafi scholar who, by the way, the Arab Salafis especially, have given him a grand title as well. They call him the Zahabi of the age, meaning the Imam Zahabi of the age. Imam Zahabi, the famous scholar of Hadith, died 748 after the Hijrah. They call Shaykh al-Muallimi al-Yemeni the Zahabi of the age, Zahabi of the Asr. Okay, if he's your Zahabi of the age, what do you have to say about his grading now? As I said, it's usually the non-Arabs who are quite extreme or fanatical on adhering to 8 and saying anything more than 8 is bid'ah. And there's no evidence for it. And that's a dangerous position to hold, because they also say that we follow the Sallallahu, alaihi, and they have to admit that the famous books which deal with this matter of the Rak'ats of Taraweeh, before our time, I'm talking hundreds of years ago, they've ascribed this position of 20 rakats to whom? The famous Imams like Abu Hanifa, Shafi'i, Ahmed ibn Hanbal, Dawud al-Zahiri, Sufyan al-Thawri, and so on. And I'll give you the quotations as we come to the end. Now we can mention another Salafi scholar who was an opponent to Al-Albani by the name of Ismail al-Ansari. He was a mufti in Saudi Arabia, and he died in 1996, 3 years before Al-Albani. Salafi in Aqidah. Okay. Ismail al-Ansari, he has a refutation of Al-Albani. That's available online in Arabic, called Tashih Hadith Salat al-Tarawih 20 Raka wal Rad al-Albani fi Tad'ifihi. So this is a work authenticating the hadith on Tarawih being 20 rakats, and a refutation of Al-Albani for weakening those evidences for 20 rakats. So this is a Salafi scholar. And this is not the only work Ismail al-Ansari wrote against Albani. Al-Albani also had the position that for women to wear circular pieces of gold, circular pieces, like a bangle, is haram. And he has some evidences, but we say those narrations have been abrogated by later narrations that allow women to wear circular pieces of gold. So this Shaykh of theirs, Ismail al-Ansari, also refuted Albani's view on that issue of wearing circular pieces of gold. So he, meaning Ismail al-Ansari, he mentioned the narration for 20 rakats in the time of Umar as mentioned in As-Sunnah al-Kubra of al-Bayhaqi, and noted that it was declared to be sahih by Imams, and Nawawi in his Khulasa and al-Majmu' with agreement by Az-Zaylai, the author of Nasab al-Raya, Taqiyuddin al-Subki in his Shar al-Minhaj, Ibn al-Iraqi in his Tarikh al-Tathrib, Al-Aini in his Umdat al-Qari, As-Suyuti in his Masabi, and Ali al-Khari in his Shar al-Muwatta, and Al-Nimawi in his Athar al-Sunan. So Ismail al-Ansari has quoted all of these earlier scholars to solidify his argument. Then we have another Salafi scholar, and Albani, he was from where originally? Albania. Now, another name for Albania is Arnaut. I mentioned Shaykh Shuaib al-Arnaut, he was from Albania as well. And they knew each other. Their families, they migrated to Damascus when the communist stronghold was over Albania. A lot of practicing Muslims, they couldn't bear the communists. They left. They went to Arab lands like Syria, Damascus, and so on. They made hijrah. So Nasiruddin al-Albani, his father Shaykh Nuh al-Albani, was a very strong follower of the Hanafi school. He was like a mufti of the Hanafi school in his time. And they had fallout. The father and the son had fallout. And this is well known. Albani himself admits to this fallout. And the father threw out the son as well. But they mention later on that they reconciled. Okay, but they had a fallout. And Shaykh Shuaib al-Arnaut also migrated with his family, his father, to Damascus alongside Shaykh Nuh al-Albani. And another Albanian who was into hadith, who also migrated in those times, we're talking about his family, maybe his father, I'm talking about, is the late Abdul Qadir al-Arnaut, also Salafi. Abdul Qadir al-Arnaut died 2004, he lived in Damascus. He has also declared the narration from Bayhaqi's As-Sunan al-Kubra to be sahih in his way, editing of Jami al-Usul fi Ahadith al-Rasul. It's a very large collection of hadith, by Imam Ibn al-Athir al-Jazari, died 606 after the Hijrah. Then, that's 3 Salafis. Number 4, the late Saudi writer known as Abdullah al-Duwaish, another Salafi from Saudi Arabia, died 1407 after the Hijrah. That's about 1987. Wrote 2 works in discreditation of Al-Albani's weakening some authentic narrations and his authentication of some apparently weak narrations. So he wrote against Albani as well. These are Salafis who are responding to Albani I'm talking about here. So he has a book, Duwaish, called Tanbih al-Qari li Taqwiya ma du'afu al-Albani. Page 47 to 48. Al-Duwaish refuted Al-Albani's weakening of the narration for 20 rakats in As-Sunan al-Kubra of Al-Bayhaqi. Then we have another Salafi, and we're talking about Salafi in Aqidah. Because some of them say we follow Hanbali school. Okay, you follow Hanbali school, we're talking about what are you in terms of your Aqidah. They say we're Salafi. Hamoud al-Tuwajiri died 1992. And by the way, this Hamoud al-Tuwajiri was also the first person to refute Al-Albani's book on Salah. That's translated into English, in Urdu and other languages. And the Western Salafis, they published it some 25, 26 years ago. They push it out and say this is the perfect way of performing the Salah according to authenticated narrations. Who's authenticated the narration? Al-Albani. But they won't tell you that Hamoud al-Tuwajiri, back in around the 60s, or late 50s, when it came out, this book, refuted this book by Al-Albani, in Arabic obviously. And that's not the only book that's a refutation of Al-Albani's book on Salah. So there are weak narrations in Al-Albani's work, and some misquotations as well, some distortions as well in his work on Salah, and that's been shown as well. And let me give you one example for the record, for the recording. In Al-Albani's book on Salah, you see in the footnote, he claims that the famous Imam Ishaq ibn Rahway that I mentioned earlier, the teacher of Bukhari, he claims that Imam Ishaq ibn Rahway would fold his arms on the chest in Salah. Blatantly he ascribes that to Imam Ishaq ibn Rahway. And he gives reference to a work as well, the manuscript of it. He gives reference. He claims that in that manuscript by Ishaq bin Mansur al-Kawsaj al-Marwazi, that he's mentioned that his teacher, al-Marwazi's teacher, Imam Ishaq ibn Rahway, would place the hands on the chest. Albani claims this. That manuscript, I have a copy. I've looked at the manuscript, and it's been published as well, separately. After Albani's prayer book I'm talking about. It's been published in the 80s, and there's 2 or 3 different editions available. When we go in there, we don't find that at all. It's not there. What do we find in that work instead? Imam Ishaq ibn Rahway says that to place the hands under the navel is strongest from the perspective of hadith. تحت السرة أقوى في الحديث. To place beneath the navel is strongest from the perspective of hadith. What a big claim against Imam Ishaq ibn Rahway, a disastrous claim that we can now expose as a total lie against Imam Ishaq ibn Rahway. That's not in there. And I challenge the Albani followers out there who are listening to this, inshallah, prove me wrong by getting the manuscript. And the manuscript is available. Show me, where did Albani get this quotation from? Albani has misquoted the author, Al-Marwazi, because in another place, what Al-Marwazi mentioned from Ishaq ibn Rahway is that when he would do the witr prayer and we do qunut, he would raise his hands to the level of the chest, the breast, the sadr. He's misunderstood this and said it meant that he would place the hands on the chest. And then he's not bothered to quote the other section where he says, تحت سرة أقوى في الحديث. So this is Imam Ishaq ibn Rahway, the teacher of Al-Bukhari. You know, some people out there, they lie and slander against the Hanafi school on the streets, I'm talking about. Young people especially, have no training in hadith, and they quote these authorities of theirs. We find that Imam Bukhari's teacher said that the strongest narrations, if you look at all the narrations on this matter of where to place the hands, the strongest narrations are saying, put the hands where? Under the navel. Are you going to attack Imam Ishaq ibn Rahway? Why are you attacking Abu Hanifa alone? Abu Hanifa said put under the navel. His students Abu Yusuf and Imam Muhammad ibn Hasan al-Shaybani say that. But they're not the only 3. Imam Sufyan al-Thawri says the same. Ishaq ibn Rahway says the same. Okay, so there are other Imams as well from the Salaf al-Salihin. And then you have the audacity to say we follow the Salaf and we respect the Salaf. But then you attack people for placing the hands under the navel. And they say this, I've heard these people say this on the streets. Oh, these Hanafis, they put their hands on their private parts. They put their hands on their private parts. What kind of language is this? What kind of disrespect is this against the A'immah, the Imams of the Salaf? Because it's not just Abu Hanifa. Okay, it's not just Abu Hanifa. It's even non-Hanafis, as I've said. Okay, even someone they respect, Ibn Hazm al-Zahiri in Al-Muhalla, the only narration he mentioned for placing specifically is a narration from Anas ibn Malik, which says placing under the navel in Al-Muhalla. This is someone they respect. Okay, let's continue. Hamoud al-Tuwayjiri in Al-Rad al-Katib al-Maftun, page 132. He has also mentioned Bayhaqi's chain and authenticated it. Then we have another Egyptian Salafi called Mustafa al-Adawi. Okay, he also authenticated this narration from the Musnad of Ali ibn al-Jad, the first source I gave, in his Bahath fi Adad Rakat Qiyamul Layl. This is a research on the Rak'ats to be performed in the night prayer, Qiyamul Layl, meaning in Ramadan. And he also mentioned some reports from the Tabi'in as well. Now also note, another Salafi, he hasn't got an exclusive work, but he has got a work, his name is Ahmed al-Najmi. Ahmed al-Najmi died 2008. He has a book called Ta'sis al-Ahkam. Ta'sis al-Ahkam, which is a commentary to a work called Umdatul Ahkam by Abdul Ghani al-Maqdisi. This is available online. Ta'sis al-Ahkam, volume 2, page 2412 to page 256. That's about, 15 pages in Ta'sis al-Ahkam. 15 pages in Arabic devoted to refuting Albani. And he wrote this reply to Albani after Albani's death, because he died in 2008. So these are Salafi scholars. I mentioned how many? 7. 7 Salafi scholars, and none of them are from the Indian subcontinent. Okay, they're from the Arab lands. They lived in the Arab lands we're talking about. They're not all Arabs, because as I've mentioned, one of them was Albanian. Abdul Qadir al-Arnaout was Albanian. So they've accepted the Bayhaqi narration or other narrations to do with 20 rakats of Tarawih. Now, what about another narration that does not contain in the chains of transmission Yazid ibn Husayfa? All of these narrations I've been mentioning from the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab. Remember, I said they all contain Yazid ibn Husayfa. How about a sanad that does not contain Yazid ibn Husayfa but also mentions 20 rakats of Tarawih? So we have another narration. And Albani, we've mentioned, he knew of this, but he tried to weaken it in his work on Tarawih. Where is it? It's in a book called Al-Mukhtara of Diyauddin al-Maqdisi. This is a scholar of the Hanbali school, died 643 after the Hijrah. And he's given a chain of transmission going back through a famous scholar of Hadith called Ahmed ibn Mani, who had a Musnad. Musnad Ahmed ibn Mani. So he's given the chain, it's a long chain. And the chain, I won't read it all out, it goes through Ibn Mani, who says Al-Hasan bin Musa narrated from Abu Ja'far al-Razi, from Al-Rabi bin Anas, from Abu Aliyah, from Ubay ibn Qab. So this chain does not contain whom? Yazid bin Husayfa. So this is a second chain, let's call it. The text states this: Umar ibn al-Khattab ordered Ubay, gave him a command to lead the people in prayer at night in Ramadan, saying the people fast during the day and cannot recite what? The Quran. Well, so will you recite the Quran for them at night? He said, O commander of the believers, this thing was not done before. Meaning people got together in Jama'ah, congregated. Obviously only for 3 nights in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. But it wasn't done in the time of Abu Bakr and a part of the Khalifa of Umar ibn al-Khattab. Okay. He said, I know, but it's better. Ahsan. Ubay led them, meaning the Sahaba, the companions, for what? 20 rakats. So this narration, Al-Mukhtara, was compiled by Diyauddin al-Maqdisi with this condition, that he will collate or gather only authentic narrations that fulfill the criteria of whom? Bukhari or Muslim or both of them. So this is the issue of Al-Mukhtara, the uniqueness of Al-Mukhtara. Not that all of the narrations are agreed upon to be sahih. Some are weak, some have been disputed by later scholars and the editor as well. The editor being Dr. Abdul Malik Dahish. So this narration I've just quoted does not contain Yazid bin Husayfa in the sanad. It was authenticated by whom? Diyauddin al-Maqdisi. And the modern day editor, Abdul Malik Dahish, you find this narration, volume 3, page 367, number 1161 of the published edition. There's only one published edition as far as I'm aware. He said, Abdul Malik Dahish, that its chain is Hasan. So at least he's not weakened it, because the chain which is Hasan is still acceptable. Acceptable evidence. So this narration is also authentic, and they both corroborate each other. The chains that contain Yazid bin Husayfa, and this one in Al-Mukhtara, or in the Musnad of Ahmed ibn Mani, that doesn't contain Yazid bin Husayfa, they reinforce each other. So both of these narrations are authentic. Now, let's look at the narrations for 8 rakats. Yazid bin Husayfa's contemporary, classmate we can say, they knew each other, is Muhammad ibn Yusuf. So now we have to remember Muhammad bin Yusuf. Muhammad bin Yusuf and his contradictory wordings for the rakats of Taraweeh. Contradictory because he didn't transmit the narration with one wording. So how did he transmit it? We find he actually transmitted it with 3 different wordings. Muhammad bin Yusuf, who's also a reliable narrator, by the way. So we find in Imam Malik's Muwatta and in another work called Ismail bin Jafar's book called Al-Hadith, and Abdul Aziz bin Muhammad in his, we find it in Sunan Sa'id ibn Mansur, and Yahya al-Kattan as found in Tarikh Medina of Ibn Shabbah, and Musannaf ibn Abi Shaybah. All of them narrate from Muhammad bin Yusuf, all of these authorities, with the wording being what? 11 rakats. Going back to whom? The Sahabi Sa'ib bin Yazid. So there's one version saying 11 rakats, meaning 8 rakats Taraweeh and 3 rakats witr. Then we have another set. Let me just mention the version Muwatta of Imam Malik, because that's the most famous book that we can mention out of these names that we just mentioned. Yahya related to me from Malik, from Muhammad bin Yusuf, that As-Sa'ib bin Yazid said, Umar ibn al-Khattab ordered Ubay bin Ka'b and Tamim al-Dari to watch the night in prayer with the people for 11 rakats. The reciter of the Quran will recite the mean, a group of medium-sized surahs, until we would be leaning on our staff from having stood so long in prayer, and we would not leave until the approach of dawn. Meaning when they have to eat before they start their fast. Suhoor we're talking about. So, this chain of transmission is sahih. The chain of transmission is sahih, but the wording is problematic. So this is a rule in science of hadith as well, that just because the chain of transmission is authentic, it does not necessitate that the wording is always going to be sahih as well. So this chain of transmission is sahih, not the problem, but the wording is problematic, it's not authentic. And there's a reason for that we're going to come to as well. How do we highlight there's a problem with the wording? How do we identify this is the process that we're going through right now? Then we find in the book called Qiyamul Layl of Imam Ibn Nasr al-Marwazi and in Fawaid Abu Bakr al-Naysaburi, we find that a scholar of hadith called Muhammad ibn Ishaq, the author of Sirah ibn Ishaq, Muhammad ibn Ishaq, he narrates it from Muhammad bin Yusuf with the wording going back to Sa'ib bin Yazid, the Sahabi, for how many rakats this time? 13 rakats. 13 rakats, that would be what? 10 rakats Taraweeh and 3 rakats witr? Or is it 12 rakats Taraweeh and 1 rakat witr? Because that is also a view, by the way, the Shafi school. So there's a problem. So Muhammad bin Yusuf, he said one time 11 rakats with the witr. Another time he said 13 rakats with the witr. And then we find in the Musannaf of Abdul Razak as-San'ani that Dawood ibn Qais and other than him relate from Muhammad bin Yusuf with his chain going back to Sa'ib bin Yazid with how many rakats this time? 21 rakats. What's 21 rakats? That's 20 rakats Taraweeh, and the odd rakat being what? Witr. 21 rakats. So, Muhammad bin Yusuf, the classmate, let's say, of Yazid bin Husayfa, he transmits it with 3 different wordings. One time he says 11 with the witr, one time he says 13 with the witr, one time he says what? 21 rakats with the witr. So what is the actual number then? What is the correct number that should be ascribed back to Muhammad bin Yusuf? Because he's obviously confused the narrations. He's jumbled up the number of rakats. Though he's a reliable narrator, even reliable narrators make errors at times as well. And later scholars have shown examples, like Imam ad-Daraqutni, who's an expert on hidden defects in hadith, Ilalul Hadith. He shows some of the famous narrators of hadith, or huffaz, memorizers of hadith, have made errors sometimes. It's human nature at the end of the day. Like whom? He has shown examples like from Yahya ibn al-Qattan. We find even Imam Malik sometimes erred. It's human nature to err. Okay? So, Muhammad bin Yusuf, though he's a transmitter and he's a reliable transmitter, he erred in the number of rakats. And what's your proof, someone may say? We'll come to that soon. So, the wording in Musannaf Abdul Razak from Dawood bin Qais, and other than him from Muhammad bin Yusuf, from Sa'ib bin Yazid, that Umar gathered the people in Ramadan to pray behind whom? Ubay bin Ka'b and Tamim al-Dari for 21 rakats, reciting some 200 verses, then leaving before the rising of Fajr. The fact that Muhammad bin Yusuf's wording is an error was declared to be so by the foremost expert on the Muwatta of Imam Malik. Remember in Muwatta Imam Malik, Muhammad bin Yusuf's chain mentions how many rakats? 11 rakats. The Salafis out there, they quote this one. Albani quotes this one, Muwatta Imam Malik. okay, which is the most authentic book of hadith according to Imam Shafi, after the Book of Allah. Obviously, after Shafi comes Bukhari. Then the scholars say, no, Bukhari, Sahih al-Bukhari is the most authentic book after the Book of Allah. So before Imam Bukhari's existence, Imam Shafi lived, and Shafi said the most authentic book of a book after the Book of Allah is the Muwatta of Imam Malik. Okay, so in Muwatta Imam Malik, that narrations is there, but the greatest commentator of the Muwatta of Imam Malik, most likely, is whom? Abu Umar ibn Abdul Bar al-Maliki. He has a commentary called Al-Tamheed Lima fil Muwatta min al-Ma'ani wal Asanid. Very large work, and there's different editions out there. Like the Moroccan edition, the first edition that was published, more than 20 volumes. So it's a very large work. And the latest edition of this work is by Dr. Bashar Awad Maruf and his team. And people would have thought this is the best edition because he's an expert on manuscripts, and he spent a long time, and he had his son helping him and someone else helping him, and they spent a long time on this work. So you think it's the best edition. This is the book, this is the edition to get. It was published by Al-Furqan here in London. And it's very expensive as well. Hundreds of pounds, I think 400, 500 pounds for the set. You think this is the best edition, let's get it. It's available online anyway for a PDF copy. But actually he made lots of mistakes, and this has been shown by Arabs, other Arab editors I'm talking about. They've shown examples of editing errors, he's missed things, and so on, when he's looking at the various manuscripts. So it's not really the best edition. So Ibn Abdul Barr, he has another book called Al-Istithkar, which he wrote after the Tamheed. What does he say in Al-Istithkar? And all this testifies that the narration for 11 rakat is an erroneous mistake. Waham wa ghalat, and that the authentic Sahih is 23 and 21 rakats. Who made the mistake? He's talking about Muhammad bin Yusuf, because he's the commentator of Muwatta Imam Malik. And there were other commentators of Muwatta Imam Malik, okay, but Ibn Abdul Barr is one of the greatest commentators of the Muwatta Imam Malik. So, let's mention Imam Malik's view then. Imam Malik, he transmits this narration from Muhammad bin Yusuf for how many rakats? 11 with the witr. But what is actual verdict of Imam Malik? I mentioned Al-Mudawwanat al-Kubra of Qadi Sahnun, died 240 after the Hijrah. He mentions in Al-Mudawwanat al-Kubra, Ibn al-Qasim said, Ibn al-Qasim is the student of Imam Malik. Ibn al-Qasim said, the rakats, meaning of Taraweeh, with witr are 39. 36 rakats and 3 witr. And you know by now, how did I get to 36 plus 3, making 39, 3 witr? I've already mentioned 20 rakats was the asr. Behind the imam or imams is 20 rakats, and they prayed 16 individually in Masjid al-Nabawi. So 20 plus 16 is 36 rakats. So Ibn al-Qasim said the rakats with witr are 39, 36 rakats and 3 witr. The Shafi'i Imam al-Nawawi said in his work, Al-Majmu' Sharh al-Muhaddab, volume 4, page 32, our madhab, meaning the Shafi school, because Nawawi was a Shafi, he says, our madhab, it is 20 rakats with 10 salams, meaning after every 2 rakats you give salam. 10 times 2 is 20 rakats. Besides the witr, and that is 5 tarwihat. Because as I said, after every 4 rakats we take a brief rest, so 5 times 4 is 20. And the tarwiha is 4 rakats with 2 taslims, in brackets, meaning after every 2 rakat there is a salam to the right and left side. This is our madhab in the Shafi'i school. And it is also the saying of Abu Hanifa and his companions, because we get some characters out there saying, oh, Abu Hanifa said 8 rakats. Abu Hanifa said 8 rakats. And I've responded to these people as well. There's a work that you can find on daltahqiq.com in about 75 pages showing they're wrong. Abu Hanifa didn't say that. He said 20. We have evidence. Imam Nawawi is saying this as well. Abu Hanifa and his companions. Ahmed, meaning Ahmed ibn Hanbal. Dawood, meaning Dawood bin Ali al-Zahiri, the founder of the Zahiri school. And other than them, and it has been transmitted by Al-Qadi Iyad, meaning the Maliki scholar, from the majority of the scholars, meaning Jumhur, said what? 20 rakats. Look at this. Imam Nawawi couldn't quote a single Imam before his time saying 8 rakats. Not even an isolated position, 8 rakats Tarawih. That is a valid position. This is someone who died in 676 after the Hijrah. 676, nearly 700 years of Islamic history, and he couldn't quote a single authority saying 8 rakat is a valid position. Now, what's the proof that Muhammad bin Yusuf admitted he narrated it as 11 and 21 rakats? What's the proof? We have a work called Fawaid by Imam Abu Bakr al-Naysaburi, died 324 after the Hijrah. And this short work, Al-Albani had access to. And he quoted from this work, but he didn't quote it correctly. Because I've checked what he had to say. His work is available online. And I've gone back to the manuscript, and I've noticed he's not correctly quoted from that manuscript. Not quoted correctly. And the manuscript, I have the copy, a color copy. The brothers here, they can see, I've digitized, when we put this up, you're going to be able to see on page 29, inshallah, a color copy, because a lot of the manuscripts that are available digital are black and white. And you can see, I've highlighted it in red. The brothers here, they can see the actual narration, I've highlighted it in red. Okay, using software. And you can see the narration is not just in the actual text, but look, there's something on the margins as well. Can you see? On the right and the left of the manuscript, on the margin, the narration actually continues. And Al-Albani, he didn't read that correctly. He quoted what seems to suit him. Okay, now let's mention this, typed up as well. Typed up. And let me mention this chain of transmission from the Fawaid of Abu Bakr al-Naysaburi, died 324 after the Hijrah. Imam Abu Bakr al-Naysaburi said that Yusuf bin Sa'id narrated to us from Hajjaj, who narrated to us from Ibn Jurayj, who said that Ismail bin Umayyah, remember this name, Ismail bin Umayyah, narrated to me that Muhammad bin Yusuf again, the son of Sa'id bin Yazid's sister, so that's his nephew, Sa'id bin Yazid's nephew is Muhammad bin Yusuf. But Yazid bin Husayfa is also related to Sa'id bin Yazid, if you read his biography. Informed him that Sa'id bin Yazid informed him by saying, Umar ibn al-Khattab gathered the people to pray behind Ubay bin Ka'b, the Sahabi, and Tamim al-Dari, the Sahabi. They would stand to recite 100 verses in a rak'ah and would not depart until we would know or have doubt as to whether the dawn had begun. Meaning Fajr was coming in. He, meaning As-Sa'ib, said we would stand for 11 rakats of prayer. So in this chain of transmission, going through Muhammad bin Yusuf, how many rakats? Again, 11 rakats. Albani quoted this to prove, look, it's 11 rakats. But then we continue with the narration. Remember, there were some portions in the margins, and this manuscript is not easy to read as well. It's not easy to read. I, meaning Ismail bin Umayyah, said, or 21 rakats, or 21 rakats. Why is he saying 21 rakats, Ismail bin Umayyah? Think about this now. Because he must have heard it from someone else. You wouldn't just come up with a random figure, would you? Or 21 rakats, he's asking who? Muhammad bin Yusuf, his teacher. Or 21 rakats? Means that he must have heard it from a third party for 21 rakats. So Muhammad bin Yusuf, he responds by saying, the one who heard that from As-Sa'ib bin Yazid was Ibn Husayfa. Remember, their classmates. Muhammad bin Yusuf and Yazid bin Husayfa, their classmates. They took from Sa'ib bin Yazid. The one who heard that from As-Sa'ib bin Yazid was Ibn Husayfa. So I, meaning Ismail bin Umayyah, questioned Yazid bin Husayfa. Meaning he went away and asked Yazid bin Husayfa, to which he replied, I thought As-Sa'ib said 21 rakats. Meaning Yazid bin Husayfa said, I'm sure I heard him say 21 rakats, Sa'ib bin Yazid. And remember, all the time Yazid bin Husayfa, in those narrations, I quote from Musnad Ali ibn al-Jad, Kitab al-Siyam, and Bayhaqi's works. You remember, Yazid bin Husayfa is consistently saying 20 rakats Taraweeh. What's the 21 then? It's the witr, the extra odd rakat. We're talking about 20. He's always said 20 rakats. And we've proven a chain that does not contain Yazid bin Husayfa, found where Diyauddin al-Maqdisi al-Mukhtara, Musnad Ahmed ibn Mani, saying also in the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab, it was 20 rakats Taraweeh. So let's continue with this narration. It said 21. Muhammad bin Yusuf said, look, Muhammad said, who's Muhammad here? Muhammad bin Yusuf said, or I said, 21. Look, Muhammad bin Yusuf suddenly remembered, oh, hold on. I'm sure I also said 21. He's now remembered something. He used to say 11. Sometimes he said 13 as well to Muhammad bin Ishaq. But this time, after Ismail bin Umayyah went away, he asked Yazid bin Husayfa. Yazid bin Husayfa said, I'm sure I 21. That's what I heard. He comes back to his teacher Muhammad bin Yusuf, and Muhammad bin Yusuf said, I said 21. He's remembered now. Or I said 21. And where did he say 21? Musannaf Abdul Razak as-San'ani. We quoted already. Abdul Razak gives his sanad going back to Muhammad bin Yusuf saying 21 rakats. So Abu Bakr al-Naysaburi said, this is a good hadith, Hasan hadith. If Ali ibn al-Madini had it, Ali ibn al-Madini is the teacher of Bukhari and an expert on hidden defects in hadith. If Ali ibn al-Madini had it, he would have been overjoyed at it, other than his words, the son of Sa'ib bin Yazid's sister. Look, Abu Bakr al-Naysaburi is saying this is a good narration. And this is a proof to show that Muhammad bin Yusuf, he erred when he said 11 rakats. He rectified and corrected himself by saying, actually it's 21 rakats. Yazid bin Husayfa said 21 rakats to Ismail bin Umayyah. Now, what about the other evidences these people use for 8 rakats? They always like to quote hadith in Bukhari and Muslim. Aisha radiallahu anha, the wife of the Prophet sallallahu narrates that the Prophet performed what? 8 rakats Tarawih. We can't argue with that. It's in Bukhari and Muslim. We're not disputing the authenticity. But is it to do with Tarawih or is it some other prayer? That's the question. They would say, the Salafis, the advocates of 8 rakats, they say, Qiyamul Layl, Tarawih, Tahajjud, call it what you want, it's maximum 8 rakats. Tarawih and Tahajjud, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's 8 rakats. They call it Qiyamul Layl. Yeah, okay. Standing by night prayer. They say it's a maximum of 8 rakats. And some of them argue there is no tahajjud prayer. There is no tahajjud prayer in when? In Ramadan. It's only 8 rakats, Qiyamul Layl, which is Tarawih. Okay, they say there's no farq, no difference or differentiation between tahajjud and Tarawih. They say that, okay. So they quote this hadith from Bukhari, number 2013, from Abu Salama bin Abdul Rahman, that he asked Aisha radiallahu anha, how was the prayer of Allah's Messenger sallallahu in Ramadan? She replied, he did not pray more than 11 rakats in Ramadan or in any other month. What she's talking about is a specific prayer. We say that she was talking about what? Tahajjud. Because what prayer do you perform outside Ramadan at night time? In Ramadan and outside, it's Tahajjud. It's 12 months of the year. He used to pray 4 rakats, let alone their beauty and length. And then he would pray 4, let alone their beauty and length. And then he would pray 3 rakat, meaning witr. She added, I asked, Allah's Messenger sallallahu, do you sleep before praying the witr? He said, Aisha, my eyes sleep, but my heart does not sleep. Allah's Messenger sallallahu performed in general tahajjud separately, so that's the end of the narration, from Salatul Taraweeh. And what's the proof of that? Where is the differentiation? In Sahih Muslim, there's a narration that proves that there's 2 prayers that the Prophet sallallahu performed. So let me just quote from the English translation, people can check. Number 2433. Number 2433 from Anas ibn Malik in Sahih Muslim. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu was observing prayer during Ramadan. So this is definitely talking about Ramadan. I came and stood by his side, meaning Anas. Then another man came and he stood likewise until we became a group. So it's like Jama'ah. When the Apostle of Allah sallallahu perceived that we were behind him, he lightened the prayer. He shortened the prayer. He then went to his abode, meaning his house, adjoining the masjid, and observed such a long prayer, the like of which he never observed with us. When it was morning, we said to him, did you perceive us during the night? Upon this he said, yes, it was this realization that induced me to do that which I did, and so on. And the narration continues. So this shows that in Masjid al-Nabawi, the Prophet led a salah and people got together behind him. This prayer, we would say, is what? Tarawih. Then he didn't want them to continue with him, so he stopped praying, he lightened the prayer, and he went to his home and continued to pray another prayer, which was very long in nature. Which was what? Tahajjud. Tahajjud. So this is an evidence that we use. There are other evidences. That's in Sahih Muslim. Now, Imam al-Tirmidhi, he knew this narration from Aisha radiallahu anha. He's the student of al-Bukhari. He has given a ruling, a conclusion on how many rakats of Tarawih were performed by those before his time. And he knew the narration of Aisha radiallahu anha for sure. So in Tirmidhi's Jami, under number 806, the people of knowledge have differed over the rakats for standing in Ramadan. He says there's a difference of opinion. Some held the view that one prays 41 rakats with the witr. Remember, I've said that already. And it is the saying of the people of Medina, Ahlul Medina, Imam Malik, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. They said 41 rakats. How? 20 rakats Tarawih is the asl. 16 by themselves. 3 rakats witr with the Imam. And 2 rakats nafl. That's 41 rakats. So now think about this. They performed the 16 rakats extra nafl on top of the 20. Can anyone say they were performing bid'ah here? They were doing an innovation? There's no record of that. They did this in Medina. And in Medina, the blessed city of Medina, these big imams were doing 16 rakats on top of the 20 behind the imam. No one says you're doing an innovation here. And such is their practice in Medina, Imam Tirmidhi said. The majority of the people of knowledge, majority, Jumhur, held it to be 20 rakats as it is related from whom? The Sahabi. Umar, Ali, the Sahabi, Ali ibn Abi Talib, and other companions of Nabi Sallallahu, alaihi wasallam. And it is the saying of Al-Thawri. This is the view of what? Sufyan Al-Thawri. And then he says, Ibn al-Mubarak, Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak, who is known as Amir al-Mu'minin fil Hadith, as is Sufyan Al-Thawri. These are big huffaz of Hadith. And then he says, Al-Shafi'i, Imam Al-Shafi'i, the founder of a madhab and the student of Imam Malik. And Imam Malik's student, Al-Shafi'i, had memorized the Muwatta of Imam Malik. So he knew, Shafi'i knew that narration for 8 rakats from Muhammad bin Yusuf in the Muwatta of Imam Malik. He surely knew of it, but why didn't he do amal on it? Because he knew there's something stronger. He must have known there's something stronger. Al-Shafi'i said, Tirmidhi is quoting, Al-Shafi'i said, I found the people of our city, Makkah, because Imam Shafi'i also resided in Makkah for a while, pray 20 rakats. Ahmed said, meaning Ahmed ibn Hanbal, there are various reports concerning it, but no specific number is settled upon. Some said 20, some said 36, but no one said less than 20, by the way. Base level was 20. Because look, Tirmidhi hasn't said the base level starts with 8. Then he continues, Tirmidhi, Ishaq, meaning Ishaq ibn Rahway, the teacher of Bukhari, said, we prefer 41 rakats according to what has been reported from Ubay ibn Qab, the Sahabi Ubay ibn Qab, who led for 20 rakats. Ibn al-Mubarak, Ahmed and Ishaq preferred praying with the Imam in the month of Ramadan. Remember earlier on I said, there is some difference of opinion amongst the Salaf. Should we go to the masjid and pray behind the Imam or not? Or should we pray at home? So there was some difference of opinion. And then Tirmidhi says, while Al-Shafi preferred a man pray by himself if he was a Qari. If he was a Qari, he was proficient in the Quran, he can pray by himself, Shafi's view. And in this chapter, there are similar reports like from Abu Dhar, the Sahabi, from Aisha radiallahu anha, Nu'man bin Bashir and Ibn Abbas. So there are other narrations, but they don't talk about the exact number of rakats. So remember what I said. Tirmidhi knew Aisha's narration, but he's not said anywhere that 8 rakats is a valid opinion. Tirmidhi. Nowhere. So he couldn't quote anyone prior to his age. And Tirmidhi died in 279 after the Hijrah. Imam al-Shafi'i, he found people in Makkah performing 20 rakats. In Medina, he must have found the same. Otherwise, he would have said, they were actually praying 8 rakats. They were acting on the narration that I know from Muwatta, Imam Malik, my teacher's book, Muwatta. That's also a proof, indirect proof, that Malik and his student Ash-Shafi'i did not do amal on that narration for 8 rakats that's transmitted by Muhammad bin Yusuf and found where? Muwatta Imam Malik. Like I've said, the chain may be sahih, but the matan, the wording, is problematic. And I've provided evidence for that. From where? Fawaid of Abu Bakr and Nishapuri or Nisaburi. Now, there's a more explicit proof to show the difference between Tahajjud and Tarawih. In the Musannaf of Ibn Abi Shayba from Imam Ibrahim al-Nakhai, a Tabi'i, okay, who met some of the Sahaba, he mentioned the difference between Tahajjud and Taraweeh in this way. There's a chain that goes back like this. Abu Bakr ibn Abi Shaybah said that Abul Ahwas, meaning Sallam bin Sulaim, as he's known, informed us from Mughira bin Miqsam, from Ibrahim, meaning Ibrahim al-Nakhai, who's known as the Faqih of Iraq, the jurist of Iraq, who said those who prayed Salatul Tahajjud did so at the side of the masjid. At the side of the masjid. And the Imam would lead the people in prayer in the month of Ramadan. What prayer would the Imam be leading? If people are performing Tahajjud on the side and the Imam is leading, what prayer are people being led in? It's going to be what? Tarawih can't be Isha, because when do you perform Tahajjud? Later on in the night. The Prophet ﷺ would perform it midway through the night or later on. I'll give you evidence for that. It's coming. Because these people, they quote the hadith of Bukhari, 8 plus 3, 11 rakats, or in Sahih Muslim. Why don't they quote the narration in Muwatta Imam Malik, which says 13 rakats from Aisha radiallahu anha? Let me quote it. So we find in the Muwatta of Imam Malik, Yahya related to me from Malik, from Makhrama bin Sulaiman, from Qurayb, the Mawla of Ibn Abbas, that Abdullah ibn Abbas told him that he had spent a night at the house of Maymuna, the wife of the Prophet Sallallahu, alaihi wasallam, who was also Ibn Abbas's mother's sister. So Maymuna, the wife of the Prophet, was Ibn Abbas's what? Aunt. So he could stay the night there. Ibn Abbas said, I lay down with my head on the breadth of the cushion, and the Messenger of Allah Sallallahu, alaihi wasallam, and his wife lay down with their heads on its length. The Messenger of Allah Sallallahu, alaihi wasallam slept until halfway through the night, or a little before or after it. So this ain't the time for Isha. Ibrahim bin Nakhai's narration I'm talking about. Tahajjud's prayed later on, so midway through the night, the last third of the night. So the Imam Ibrahim bin Nakhai is referring to was leading what? Taraweeh. And the people on the side were performing Tahajjud. So this is an answer to those. There's no difference between Taraweeh and Tahajjud. It's one and the same thing. They haven't studied the narrations then. And there are more evidence as well. Some of the contemporary scholars have written set number of points showing the difference between Taraweeh and Tahajjud. There are works available in Urdu, and some of it has been put out in English as well online. So he awoke and sat up and wiped the sleep away from his face with his hand. Then he recited the last 10 ayats of Surah Ali Imran. Then he got up and went over to a water skin which was hanging up and did wudu from it, doing his wudu thoroughly, and then he stood in prayer. For what? Tahajjud. Ibn Abbas continued, I stood up and did the same, and then went and stood by his side. The Messenger of Allah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam put his right hand on my head and took my right ear and tweaked it. He prayed, now listen to this, 2 rakats, then 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 2 rakats, and then prayed an odd rakat. So 2 times 6 is 12, plus 1 is 13 rakats. Then he laid down until the muazzin came to him, and then prayed 2 quick rakats and went out and prayed subh, meaning fajr. The 2 rakats sunnah, he prayed at home. Then he went to Masjid al-Nabawi and prayed and led fajr prayer. So look, in Maymuna's residence, the Prophet led how many rakats? 13 rakats. So why don't these people perform 12 rakats Taraweeh and 1 rakat witr? Those who say it's only 8. Why don't you pray 12 rakats Taraweeh and 1 rakat witr? It's in Muwatta Imam Malik. Why are you giving preference to the 8 rakat narration? Only in Muwatta Imam Malik. And there is also another narration as well in Muwatta Imam Malik talking about, if I recall, 12 rakats. They used to perform a certain number of verses of the Quran in 12 rakats from Al-A'raj. Al-A'raj, the teacher of Imam Malik. There is another narration in there as well. So, we'll come into the end now. Imam Ibn Abdul Bar's summation on the rakats of Taraweeh. Remember why I'm quoting Ibn Abdul Bar? Because he knew of this narration that these people quote from the Muwatta Imam Malik. And I've already said the narration of Aisha has nothing to do with Taraweeh. You're misquoting. The Imams knew this narration. All of these Imams are saying 20. How would they not know of the narration of Aisha? Of course they knew the narration. You find it in some of their collections of hadith I'm talking about. So, Al-Hafiz Ibn Abdul Bar in his Al-Istidhkar, he said, and it is the saying of most of the scholars, Jumhur al-Ulama, and it is the saying of the Kufiyun, meaning the scholars of Kufa in Iraq, Ash-Shafi'i, and most of the jurisprudence, Akthar al-Fuqaha, and it is Sahih, authentic, from Ubay ibn Qab, a Sahabi, without any difference from the Sahaba. So he's saying the narration going back to Ubay ibn Ka'b is sahih, and there's no difference of opinion amongst the Sahaba. For how many rakats? 20, because he's an advocate of 20 rakats. And Ibn Abdul Bar, he gave some other narrations as well. And he also mentions the positions of the Imams again. Let me finish by saying, he also said, after narrating a report from Ali ibn Abi Talib, ordering the performance of 20 rak'ah, Ibn Abdul Bar declared, and this, it is the preferred choice with us, and our success is with Allah, meaning 20 rak'ahs Tarawih. Now, I've already said, some of the scholars have indicated ijma on 20 rak'ahs, agreement on 20 rak'ahs. So let's quote someone from earlier times, a book that's been published in the last few years by Imam Abul Hasan Ibn al-Kattan al-Fasi, died 628 after the Hijrah. He's from the Maliki school. A book called Al-Iqna fi Masail al-Ijma, the conviction on the legal rulings related to what agreement, ijma, either agreement of the Sahaba or the Mujtahid Imams and so on. So this book's been published, volume 1, page 174. He mentions under 943, he says, from Ibn Abbas that the Prophet ﷺ would pray in Ramadan 20 rakats and the witr. So he has not given a grading on this narration. And that's the famous one, as I've said. Most of the scholars, when they talk about, is there any evidence for the Prophet ﷺ performing 20 rakats directly, they always quote the 20 rakats. They don't know of the Jabir one. Very few knew of the Jabir one. Okay. Number 944 gets interesting. He says 20 rakat has been related from Ali radiallahu anhu and Shutayr bin Shakal, as one of these early generation scholars, and وهو صحيح عن أبي بن كعب من غير خلاف من الصحابة وهو قول الجمهور. And it is sahih from Ubay bin Ka'b, meaning the narration is authentic from Ubay bin Ka'b, without difference of opinion from the Sahaba, and it is the qawl, meaning the saying of the majority al-Jumhur. So this book is about ijma, and he is saying there's ijma of the Sahaba. Ijma of the Sahaba, they pray 20, no less than 20. So those who are advocating 8, they're advocating a position which is shadh, aberrant position. And the dalail, the evidences that they have put forward, either they're weak, like the one I've showed from Muhammad bin Yusuf, he made an error, even though he's reliable, he erred, or misrepresentation or misinterpretation of narrations attributed or going back to Aisha radiallahu anha. They misrepresented the ma'na, the meaning of this narration. And if you're following the Salafus Salihin and not just one Imam exclusively, then why don't you quote and admit all of these Imams that we've quoted, like Abu Hanifa, Malik, Shafi'i, Ahmed ibn Hanbal, Dawud al-Zahiri, Sufyan al-Thawri, Ibn al-Mubarak, Ishaq ibn Rahwayh. There's 8 Imams from the Salaf. And I've quoted up to now. All of these lived before 300 AH. All of them at base level say how many? 20 rakats. Not one of them said 8 is a valid position. So with that, we come to a conclusion, and that we advise, for those who are listening, that if you didn't know of the evidences for 20 rakats and you were performing 8 rakats, and you also say you don't do taqleed, so-called blind following, and you look at the dalail, the evidences, and you don't follow one specific madhab, then the onus is on you to stop your blind following now, of your own peculiar scholars that you follow on this position for 8 rakats, and pay heed at the evidences that we've quoted today, especially those 7 or 8 Arab Salafi scholars, one was non-Arab, Abdul Qadir al-Naud, who also authenticated our main dalil from Bayhaqi's collection, mentioning 20 rakats of Taraweeh. It was done in the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab, and the proofs that show that Muhammad bin Yusuf erred in saying 8 rakats, 8 plus 3, witr, or 13 rakats with the witr. He actually said 21 rakats as well, where we've got it in Musannaf of Abdul Razak al-San'ani and the Fawaid of Abu Bakr al-Naysaburi, died 324 after the Hijrah, I've said. And if you say Aisha's narration is definitely capping off 8 rakats as the maximum for Tarawih, then you need to quote the Imams of the Salaf. I don't want to hear X from this time said it, or 150 years ago. What's that? They need to quote the Salaf saying Aisha's narration means you don't pray more than 8 rakats of Tarawih. So with that we conclude. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.